A hospital in the shadow of heaven. Take a slow breath, settle into your chair, or perhaps into your bed, and allow the noise of the modern world to drift somewhere far beyond the horizon. Tonight, we are traveling almost 1,000 years into the past, to a city that countless people believed stood at the very center of creation. Jerusalem, a place where every stone carried a story, where three great religions gazed upon the same streets and found different meanings, where the scent of olive wood, incense, sweat, horses, fresh bread, and smoke floated together beneath a relentless Middle Eastern sun. It was a city of prayers whispered in dozens of languages, a city of merchants, monks, beggars, soldiers, pilgrims, and, naturally, people determined to fight over it. Because, of course, they were. If history teaches us anything, it is that humans possess an astonishing ability to transform places of peace into places of extraordinary violence. Yet hidden among kings seeking glory and armies seeking conquest was another story. A quieter story, not about crowns, not about famous battles, but about exhausted travelers with blistered feet, about frightened patients lying on straw beds, about monks carrying bowls of soup through dim stone corridors, about an order of men who began their history not with swords, but with bandages, the Knights Hospitaller. Their reputation today is often wrapped in shining armor and crimson banners fluttering above mighty castles. Popular imagination remembers them charging across dusty battlefields, defending impossible fortresses, standing shoulder to shoulder against overwhelming odds. Those stories are true, but they are only the final chapters. Long before they became legendary warriors, they were caretakers. Their greatest weapon was compassion. And oddly enough, it was compassion that eventually led them into war. Our story begins before anyone could have imagined that transformation. Before Crusades. Before kingdoms. Before Europe launched armies toward the Eastern Mediterranean. It begins with a hospital. A surprisingly ordinary hospital. And perhaps that is what makes the story extraordinary. The year is somewhere around 1070. The Middle East is a complicated mosaic of empires, faiths, languages, and ambitions. The Byzantine Empire still clings to its ancient prestige from Constantinople. The Seljuk Turks are expanding rapidly across Anatolia and Syria. The Fatimid Caliphate rules Egypt and, at times, Jerusalem itself. Cities change hands. Governors come and go. Dynasties rise with breathtaking confidence before collapsing into equally breathtaking failure. Yet through all these political earthquakes, one thing remains remarkably constant. Pilgrims keep arriving. Every year, thousands of Christians leave their homes in France, Germany, England, Italy, Scandinavia, and countless villages whose names have long vanished from memory. They cross mountains. They sail dangerous seas. They survive storms, robbers, disease, hunger, and occasionally one another. Some spend months walking. Others spend years saving enough money simply to begin the journey. Many never return home. But reaching Jerusalem, even for a single day, made every hardship worthwhile. At least that was the hope. The reality often proved harsher. Imagine arriving after nearly a year on the road. Your clothes are torn. Your shoes have fallen apart somewhere in Asia Minor. Your feet bleed with every step. You haven't eaten properly in days. You don't speak Arabic. You don't know where to sleep. You know almost no one. And suddenly illness arrives. Heat stroke, dysentery, fever, infection. One small cut becomes life-threatening. One contaminated drink of water becomes the final chapter of your pilgrimage. Thousands found themselves exactly in that position. Someone had to help them. Not far from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre stood a charitable institution operated by merchants from the Italian city of Amalfi. These merchants had obtained permission decades earlier to establish a monastery and hospital for Christian pilgrims. It was modest, not luxurious, not famous, certainly not wealthy. Its walls were plain stone. Its windows admitted thin beams of sunlight. Simple wooden beds lined crowded rooms. Clay lamps burned through long evenings. Water echoed softly inside stone basins. The smell was an unusual mixture of herbs, fresh bread, olive oil, candle smoke, and human suffering. This was no palace. But for someone collapsing after months of travel, it might as well have been paradise. The brothers who worked there believed something radical. Every patient deserved dignity, rich or poor, knight or peasant, noblewoman or beggar. Every sick stranger represented Christ himself. It was a remarkably difficult philosophy, especially after cleaning the 50th infected wound of the week. Holiness often sounds inspiring until someone asks you to wash another person's feet. Still, they persisted. They changed bandages, cooked meals, mixed herbal medicines, washed clothing, buried the dead, prayed beside the dying. Sometimes there was little medicine to offer. Sometimes only comfort remained. But comfort mattered, perhaps more than anyone realized. Among these brothers emerged a remarkable figure, a man history remembers simply as Brother Gerard. Nobody knows his early life with complete certainty. Even medieval chroniclers struggled to separate fact from legend. Some claimed he was French. Others insisted he came from Italy. A few embroidered his life with miraculous tales that probably became more impressive each time they were retold beside monastery fireplaces. History can be wonderfully unreliable, especially when monks discover storytelling. What seems certain is that Gerard possessed extraordinary administrative ability combined with genuine humility, a surprisingly rare combination. Many people can organize institutions. Many people can inspire kindness. Doing both simultaneously is much harder. Gerard transformed the hospital into something larger than a local charity. He built networks, encouraged donations, established discipline, created systems that allowed strangers from every corner of Christendom to receive care. The hospital became known throughout Europe. Pilgrims departing from France heard stories about it. Merchants sailing from Italy carried its reputation. Letters traveled farther than soldiers. Slowly, generosity flowed toward Jerusalem. Coins, land, food, livestock, books, medical supplies. The hospital grew, not because anyone sought wealth, but because suffering rarely runs out of customers. Then history arrived with thunder. In November 1095, thousands gathered in the French town of Clermont. Pope Urban II stood before bishops, nobles, and common people. His speech would become one of the most consequential in medieval history. He urged Western Christians to aid Byzantium and reclaim Jerusalem. His words ignited imaginations. Whether every sentence later attributed to him was actually spoken remains uncertain. Medieval chroniclers enjoyed improving speeches after the fact. One suspects they would have made excellent screenplay writers. Still, the message spread with astonishing speed. Take the cross. Journey east. Fight for Jerusalem. Within months, Europe began moving. Not merely armies. Entire populations. Knights polished armor. Blacksmiths worked endlessly. Families sold land. Priests blessed travelers. Children watched fathers disappear beyond distant hills. It became known as the First Crusade. No one involved understood how profoundly it would reshape history. Least of all Brother Gerard. The crusading armies marched through hardship almost impossible to exaggerate. Disease consumed thousands. Starvation stalked every column. Arguments erupted constantly. Leaders quarreled. Supplies vanished. Weather refused cooperation. If medieval logistics had a motto, it might have been, "We'll figure something out." Occasionally they actually did. Against remarkable odds, the Crusaders survived Anatolia, besieged Antioch, and eventually reached Jerusalem in June 1099. They found a city heavily defended. Walls rose above them beneath scorching summer skies. The siege lasted weeks. Water grew scarce. Food scarcer still. Men collapsed from exhaustion. Then, in July 1099, everything exploded. Siege towers rolled forward. Scaling ladders reached the battlements. Fighting engulfed the walls. Crusaders poured into Jerusalem. What followed became one of medieval history's darkest episodes. Violence swept through the city. Muslims were killed. Jews were killed. Even some Eastern Christians suffered amid the chaos. Contemporary chroniclers described streets running with blood. Modern historians debate the exact scale. The horror itself remains undeniable. Jerusalem had changed rulers. At terrible cost. When the shouting faded. When swords finally lowered. When smoke drifted above shattered rooftops. Someone had to care for the wounded. Both victors and survivors. Brother Gerard and his hospital suddenly became indispensable. Imagine the days after the conquest. Hundreds arrived carrying injuries, arrow wounds, sword cuts, broken bones, burns, infections, exhaustion beyond description. The hospital overflowed almost immediately. Beds filled, hallways filled, courtyards filled. Those still able to stand assisted those who could not. Water disappeared rapidly. Bread vanished almost as quickly. The brothers worked without rest. Hours blurred together. Morning resembled evening. Prayer mixed with surgery. Meals became interruptions rather than events. Some patients recovered. Others quietly slipped away beneath whispered prayers. Gerard himself reportedly moved constantly through the wards, encouraging, organizing, comforting, perhaps grieving, because even victory leaves scars, especially victory purchased with suffering. The newly established Kingdom of Jerusalem soon recognized the hospital's importance. The Crusader state was fragile, surrounded by enemies, dependent upon constant arrivals from Europe. Pilgrims continued coming. So did disease. Kings understood something obvious. Healthy pilgrims strengthened the kingdom. Dead pilgrims did not. Support flowed toward Gerard's institution. Land grants increased. Donations multiplied. Privileges accumulated. Within only a few years, the hospital possessed estates not merely in the Holy Land, but across Europe itself. An extraordinary international network slowly emerged. Villages in France helped feed patients in Jerusalem. Farms in Italy financed medicines in Palestine. English donations purchased blankets. Spanish vineyards produced wine for hospitals thousands of miles away. An early medieval multinational organization, remarkably efficient, especially considering messages traveled by horse and ship, and sometimes optimistic monks. Yet despite growing influence, the brothers remained monks. Their daily rhythm revolved around prayer. Before sunrise, bells echoed softly through stone corridors. Brothers rose from narrow beds. Candles flickered. Voices joined together in Latin chants. Outside, Jerusalem slowly awakened. Roosters crowed. Merchants prepared stalls. Camels grumbled with profound dissatisfaction. Some things never change. After prayers came work. Patients needed washing. Meals required cooking. Medicines demanded preparation. Visitors arrived seeking assistance. Accounts required recording. Supplies had to be distributed carefully. Disease ignored weekends. Illness respected no feast days. The work never truly ended. Yet they accepted that, because service itself had become worship. One remarkable feature distinguished Gerard's hospital from many others of its time. Cleanliness. Not modern hospital cleanliness, certainly. Nobody possessed antibiotics. Nobody understood bacteria. The concept of microscopic organisms would have sounded like fantasy. Yet practical experience taught valuable lessons. Fresh water mattered. Clean bedding mattered. Ventilation mattered. Nutritious food mattered. Hospitalers washed patients regularly, changed linens, prepared balanced meals whenever possible, separated certain illnesses. Simple practices, centuries ahead of widespread acceptance. Sometimes compassion accidentally discovers science. Without realizing it, pilgrims who recovered rarely forgot the experience. Returning home, they carried stories, not merely about Jerusalem, but about the brothers, about kindness, about gentle voices speaking unfamiliar languages, about soup served to strangers, about wounds carefully bandaged, about monks who expected nothing in return. Europe listened. Parents told children. Priests mentioned the hospital during sermons. Nobles remembered it while drafting wills. Donations increased further. The institution became something remarkable, a bridge connecting continents through charity. Not conquest, not politics, simple generosity, which, strangely enough, would eventually finance castles. History enjoys irony. Still, danger surrounded Jerusalem. Bandits haunted roads. Pilgrims disappeared between cities. Caravans required protection. The Holy Land remained beautiful. It also remained spectacularly unsafe. At first, the hospital brothers relied upon others for security. Local soldiers, Crusader knights, passing escorts. But dependence has limits, especially when your patients keep getting robbed before reaching your doors. Some brothers began accompanying travelers, initially armed only lightly, more guardians than warriors, protection rather than battle. It seemed practical, temporary, reasonable. As if that could ever remain simple in medieval politics. Within a generation, everything would change. The caregivers would become soldiers. The hospital would become a military order. Their white cross would fly above some of the strongest fortresses ever built. And the brothers who once carried bowls of soup would eventually carry swords into battles that echoed across centuries. But that is a story for the next chapter. For now, let the evening settle once more over Jerusalem. The bells of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre ring softly through cooling air. Oil lamps flicker behind hospital windows. Some patients sleep peacefully. Others whisper prayers. Brother Gerard walks quietly through the corridors, checking each bedside one last time before dawn arrives again. He cannot know what history will remember. He cannot know that nearly 1,000 years later, people around the world will still speak the name of the order he helped build. Perhaps he would not have cared. Perhaps that was precisely why it endured. For great institutions are rarely born from dreams of glory. More often, they begin with someone kneeling beside a stranger, offering bread, water, and hope in a city where all three could be difficult to find. And beneath the stars above Jerusalem, while empires continued their endless arguments, the little hospital kept its lamps burning through the night, waiting for the next weary traveler to knock upon its door. When healers became warrior monks, morning arrived slowly over Jerusalem. The first rays of sunlight creep across pale limestone walls, turning the city from cool shades of blue into warm gold. Doves flutter across rooftops. Donkeys complain about another day of work with all the enthusiasm one might expect. Somewhere nearby, bread is already baking inside clay ovens, and the comforting scent drifts through narrow streets long before most pilgrims have opened their eyes. Inside the Hospital of St. John, however, the day has already begun. Candles still flicker in the chapel where brothers finish their dawn prayers. Their voices rise together in measured Latin chants, echoing softly against stone walls polished smooth by generations of footsteps. Outside the chapel, another kind of music begins. The clatter of wooden buckets, the scrape of benches, the splash of clean water, the quiet cough of recovering patients. A brother carefully unwraps yesterday's bandages from an old pilgrim's leg. Another stirs a pot of vegetable stew large enough to feed what appears to be half of Europe. Someone sweeps dust from the corridors, fully aware that Jerusalem will replace it within the hour. Dust has always been remarkably confident. This was still the true heart of the Hospitaller order. Not the battlefield, not the castle, not the sword. Service. If you had walked into the hospital during these years, you might never have guessed that history would one day remember these men primarily as warriors. They wore simple black robes marked with a white cross. Their hands smelled more often of herbs than steel. They spent far more time lifting the sick than lifting weapons. Yet outside those walls, the world was changing. And the Holy Land had a peculiar talent for forcing peaceful people to make difficult decisions. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, established after the First Crusade, was young and fragile. On maps drawn in Europe, it looked impressive enough. A Christian kingdom stretching along the eastern Mediterranean. Holy cities reclaimed. Castles rising proudly above rocky hills. Kings ruling beneath the cross. Reality was considerably less reassuring. The kingdom was surrounded by powerful Muslim states. Its population remained surprisingly small. Many crusaders had returned home after fulfilling their vows, leaving only a fraction behind to defend thousands of square miles. The numbers were uncomfortable. Some historians estimate that only a few hundred fully trained knights stood ready to defend the kingdom at any given moment. A few hundred. To protect an entire frontier. It was rather like trying to guard an entire coastline using one determined neighborhood watch. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on one's perspective, medieval optimism often ignored arithmetic. The greatest danger was not always large armies. Sometimes it was the road. Pilgrims continued arriving by the thousands every year. Ships landed at ports like Jaffa before weary travelers began the final march toward Jerusalem. The distance was not especially great. Perhaps 50 miles. Today that sounds manageable. Then, it could become deadly. Bandits lurked in rocky valleys. Small raiding parties watched mountain passes. Political alliances shifted constantly. One week a road appeared relatively safe. The next week someone decided robbing pilgrims seemed like an excellent career opportunity. And unlike modern tourists, Medieval pilgrims could not simply check online reviews before choosing their route. The roads demanded courage. And luck. Sometimes far more luck than courage. Stories spread through the hospital. A family attacked only a day's journey from Jerusalem. An elderly priest found wandering alone after thieves had stolen everything he owned. Merchants arriving with terrible wounds. Pilgrims disappearing entirely. Brother Gerard listened. So did the brothers under his leadership. Every injured traveler represented a failure that medicine alone could not solve. Healing broken bones was admirable. Preventing broken bones altogether seemed even better. The problem, naturally, was how. Hospitallers were monks. Monks were not supposed to wage war. They had taken vows. Poverty. Chastity. Obedience. Nowhere did those vows mention charging toward enemy cavalry with a lance. Yet medieval life rarely fit neatly inside theological categories. A difficult question emerged. Could a monk defend innocent people without abandoning his religious calling? Was violence always sinful? Or could force become an act of charity when used solely to protect the helpless? Church scholars debated. Kings debated. Bishops debated. Medieval Christianity possessed no shortage of people willing to debate almost anything, sometimes for decades. Meanwhile, pilgrims continued being attacked. Practical necessity has a way of ending philosophical arguments. Slowly, almost reluctantly, some brothers began carrying weapons. Not because they sought glory, not because they desired conquest. Simply because escorting unarmed travelers through dangerous countryside had become increasingly unrealistic. One sword could discourage a thief. Several disciplined brothers could discourage an entire gang. At least, that was the hope. Around the same time, another remarkable organization emerged. The Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ, better known today as the Knights Templar. They too combined religious vows with military service. Unlike the Hospitallers, however, protecting pilgrims became their primary mission almost immediately. The two orders developed side by side. History often presents them as rivals. The truth proved more complicated. They cooperated frequently, argued occasionally, competed for donations, shared dangers, respected one another's courage. Imagine two neighboring monasteries whose members occasionally compared castles instead of vegetable gardens. Only slightly more dangerous. Brother Gerard did not live long enough to see the full transformation. He died around 1120. His passing marked the end of the order's first chapter. He had built a hospital, a network of charity, a reputation for compassion stretching across Europe. He had laid foundations stronger than he probably realized. Leadership now passed to a man named Raymond Dupuy. If Gerard had been the order's gentle architect, Raymond became its determined builder. He inherited an institution respected throughout Christendom. He intended to make it indispensable. Raymond was practical, extremely practical. The hospital would remain the order's heart. That never changed. But hospitals required protection. Pilgrims required escorts. The kingdom required defenders. Reality demanded adaptation. Under Raymond's leadership, the Hospitallers officially embraced military responsibilities. The decision did not happen overnight. There was no dramatic ceremony where every monk suddenly exchanged his walking stick for a sword. Change came gradually, carefully, almost cautiously. The brothers continued caring for patients every single day. They simply added another responsibility. When necessary, they would fight. Their rule, the document governing daily life, expanded accordingly. Prayer remained central. Charity remained sacred. Discipline became even stricter. Brothers obeyed their superiors without question. Personal wealth remained forbidden. Luxury remained forbidden. A Hospitaller knight owned remarkably little. His armor belonged to the order. His horse belonged to the order. Even his sword belonged to the order. If he died tomorrow, another brother would use them. Individual glory mattered very little. The mission mattered everything. This created something unusual. An army without personal ambition. At least in theory. They were still human, after all. No medieval institution ever achieved perfection, or anything particularly close. Training transformed daily routines. Morning prayers still echoed through the chapel. Hospital work still consumed countless hours. But now, somewhere beyond the walls, mounted brothers practiced cavalry maneuvers beneath the hot Levantine sun. Wooden practice, swords cracked together. Lances struck targets. Horses thundered across dusty fields. Armor clattered rhythmically. Unlike feudal knights, who often served only limited periods, Hospitaller knights trained continuously. This made them exceptionally professional. Fighting was no longer a temporary obligation. It became part of a lifelong religious vocation. The sword itself became another tool of service. A troubling idea for some, an inspiring one for others. History rarely asks our permission before presenting impossible choices. The brothers also developed a distinctive appearance. Over their black robes they wore the famous white cross. Simple, recognizable, powerful. The 8-pointed cross that later became synonymous with the order gradually acquired symbolic meanings. Some associated its points with the Beatitudes. Others connected them to virtues expected of Christian knights. Loyalty, piety, generosity, bravery, honor, compassion, justice, perseverance. Whether every brother reflected on those meanings while sweating inside heavy mail armor remains uncertain. One suspects many were simply hoping not to collapse from the heat. The Levant possessed little sympathy for Northern Europeans wearing 30 kilograms of metal. As the order expanded, donations flooded in from across Europe. Kings granted estates. Nobles donated villages. Widows left vineyards in their wills. Merchants contributed ships. Entire farms became Hospitaller property. These European estates served one purpose: supporting the mission overseas. Grain harvested in France helped feed hospitals in Jerusalem. English sheep funded new fortifications. Italian merchants transported supplies. Spanish vineyards financed medical care. An astonishing logistical network slowly emerged. Long before multinational corporations. Long before modern banking. The Hospitallers managed resources stretching from Scotland to Syria. Not perfectly. Nothing medieval ever operated perfectly, but impressively enough to astonish modern historians. The hospital itself continued growing. Visitors described enormous wards capable of caring for hundreds of patients simultaneously. Some medieval writers claimed thousands. They probably exaggerated. Medieval chroniclers occasionally treated numbers as creative suggestions rather than measurable facts. Still, by the standards of the age, it was immense. Patients received individual beds, an extraordinary luxury, fresh linen, nutritious food, medical attention. Separate kitchens prepared meals suitable for different illnesses. Brothers inspected food carefully. Doctors consulted ancient medical texts inherited from Greek and Arab traditions. The order absorbed knowledge wherever it could find it. Compassion proved remarkably open-minded. Jerusalem itself remained endlessly fascinating. Markets overflowed with languages: Arabic, Greek, Latin, Armenian, Syriac, Hebrew, Italian, French, German. The city sounded like an entire continent speaking simultaneously. Spices from India filled the air. Silks arrived from distant lands. Pilgrims purchased tiny religious souvenirs with enormous enthusiasm. Some things truly never change. Merchants argued loudly over prices. Children darted through crowded streets. Water sellers called for customers beneath the afternoon sun. Meanwhile, above it all, church bells answered the distant call to prayer from Muslim communities beyond Crusader territories. Civilizations met here every single day. Sometimes peacefully, sometimes tragically, always intensely. As years passed, Hospitaller patrols became increasingly common along dangerous roads. Pilgrims often relaxed visibly upon seeing the familiar white cross approaching. It meant protection. It meant discipline. It meant someone stood between them and uncertainty. Not every journey ended safely. The Holy Land remained dangerous, but many lives were undoubtedly saved. Ironically, the brothers discovered something unexpected. Protecting travelers often required fewer battles than anyone feared. Bandits preferred easier victims. Visible strength prevented violence before violence began. An old lesson repeated throughout history. Peace sometimes depends upon convincing troublemakers to seek opportunities elsewhere. Still, darker storms gathered beyond the horizon. Powerful Muslim leaders watched the Crusader states carefully. The fragile balance established after the First Crusade would not last forever. New alliances formed. Ambitious rulers emerged. Among them, One man would eventually unite much of the Islamic world with remarkable skill. His name was Salah ad-Din. Saladin. His arrival would change everything. For the Hospitallers, for the Templars, for Jerusalem itself. But that future remained hidden. For now, as evening settles once again over the holy city, the brothers complete another exhausting day. One knight removes his mail shirt after hours escorting pilgrims through sun-baked hills. Another quietly returns to the hospital ward to spoon warm broth into the hands of a feverish traveler. In one room, a sword leans against a stone wall. In another, herbs dry beside a patient's bed. Neither seems out of place anymore. The transformation has begun. The healers have not stopped healing. They have simply learned that sometimes mercy must ride on horseback. Sometimes compassion wears armor. And sometimes, beneath a black robe marked with a white cross, beats the heart of a monk prepared to defend strangers he will never know. Outside, Jerusalem grows quiet beneath a sky crowded with stars. The lamps of the Hospital of St. John burn late into the night, their warm glow visible through narrow windows. Travelers continue arriving, some seeking miracles, some seeking forgiveness, many simply seeking a place to rest. And the brothers wait, as they always have, ready with bread, ready with prayers, ready, if necessary, with swords, castles of stone, faith, and fire. Night lingers just a little longer over the hills of the Holy Land. The stars slowly surrender to dawn, one by one, until only the brightest remain above the rugged limestone ridges stretching from Galilee to Judea. A cool breeze moves through olive groves before disappearing into deep valleys where shepherds still sleep beside small fires that have burned through the night. Soon, the first rays of sunlight will warm the stones of Jerusalem. Soon, merchants will argue over prices. Soon, priests, imams, and rabbis will begin another day of worship beneath the same sky. And somewhere along the winding roads between the ports and the holy city, a line of weary pilgrims will hear something that instantly brings relief. The rhythmic sound of horses, not the frantic gallop of raiders, not the thunder of an invading army, but the measured, disciplined pace of Hospitaller knights riding patrol beneath black banners bearing a brilliant white cross. For many travelers, that sound meant something simple. You might live to reach Jerusalem. By the middle decades of the 12th century, the Knights Hospitaller had become something almost unprecedented. They remained monks. They still operated hospitals. Their vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience remained unchanged. Yet they had also become one of the finest professional military organizations in the medieval world. It was an unusual combination. Imagine a surgeon who also commanded a fortress, or a monk who could organize supply chains stretching across 3 continents while leading cavalry into battle. History occasionally produces institutions so unique that they seem almost fictional. The Hospitallers were one of them. But to understand why they became so powerful, we must leave the crowded streets of Jerusalem and journey into the lonely hills where stone castles stood against the horizon. Because the Hospitallers were not simply building hospitals anymore. They were building mountains. Or at least, structures that looked remarkably determined to become mountains. The Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem was never particularly large. Its greatest weakness was geography. The coastline offered valuable ports. The interior held sacred cities. But between them stretched hills, deserts, forests, rocky passes, and isolated valleys. Enemy armies could appear from almost any direction. Communication was slow. Reinforcements slower. If a frontier collapsed, help might arrive days or weeks too late. The solution seemed obvious. Build castles. Lots of castles. Very large castles. Preferably on hills so steep that attackers questioned every life decision that had brought them there. Medieval military engineers embraced this philosophy enthusiastically, and no organization embraced it more successfully than the Hospitallers. A castle in the 12th century was not merely a home for nobles. It was an entire military machine. It stored food, collected rainwater, protected civilians, controlled roads, served as an administrative center, housed soldiers, watched over valleys, sent warning signals across miles of countryside. It was a fortress, warehouse, government office, and emergency shelter all wrapped inside walls several meters thick. Hospitaller castles became masterpieces of defensive architecture. Every doorway, every staircase, every tower, every window, everything served a purpose. Nothing existed merely because it looked impressive, although they certainly looked impressive. One suspect's medieval architects occasionally admired their own work just a little. Among these mighty strongholds, one castle would become legendary: Krak de Chevaliers. Its name alone carries a certain weight. Even today, standing before its towering walls feels less like visiting a ruin and more like encountering a mountain that somehow learned geometry. The Hospitallers received Krak around the year 1142. At first glance, its location seems almost unfair. The fortress crowns a hill overlooking the Homs Gap, one of the most important passages connecting the Mediterranean coast with the interior of Syria. Anyone wishing to move armies through the region would likely pass nearby, which meant anyone wishing to invade Crusader territory would have a rather unpleasant conversation with the Hospitallers first. Imagine approaching Krak as an enemy commander. Long before reaching its walls, you would see it rising above the landscape. Massive towers, high curtain walls, arrow slits staring down like countless watchful eyes. The entire fortress seems to emerge naturally from the rock beneath it. Closer still, the scale becomes almost intimidating. Outer walls rise before you. Behind them, even higher inner walls. Behind those, towers. Behind those, more defenses. The deeper you advance, the stronger the castle becomes. It was defense in layers. An onion made entirely of stone. A remarkably dangerous onion. The Hospitallers transformed Krak continuously. Each generation improved the defenses. Walls grew thicker. Gatehouses became more elaborate. Towers expanded. Storage rooms multiplied. Rainwater cisterns deepened. Every siege taught new lessons. Every lesson became another improvement. Eventually, the castle could shelter nearly 2,000 people. Food stores could sustain defenders for years. Years. Imagine besieging a fortress only to discover the defenders had enough grain, salted meat, wine, and water to outlast your patience. Many attackers simply gave up. Starving the Hospitallers proved surprisingly difficult. Life inside the castle followed an almost monastic rhythm. Before sunrise, bells echoed through stone corridors. Brothers gathered for prayer. The chapel remained the spiritual heart of the fortress. Even surrounded by weapons, faith remained central. After prayers came inspection. Armor checked. Weapons maintained. Horses fed. Walls examined. Supplies counted. Discipline governed everything. Even small mistakes could prove fatal during a siege. A neglected hinge. A loose stone. Spoiled grain. One forgotten barrel of water. Details mattered. History often depends upon details too small to notice until they suddenly become enormous. The knights themselves lived surprisingly simply. No luxurious chambers awaited them. No extravagant feasts appeared nightly. Hospitaller regulations discouraged personal comfort. Meals remained modest. Bread, vegetables, cheese. Occasionally meat. Wine diluted with water. Silence often accompanied dining while passages from scripture were read aloud. Not exactly the atmosphere of a lively tavern, though perhaps easier on the digestion. Training occupied much of every day. Mounted combat, swordsmanship, archery, formation drills, signal practice, emergency responses. Young brothers repeated movements until instinct replaced conscious thought. The battlefield rarely rewarded hesitation, especially against experienced opponents. Hospitaller discipline became famous across the Eastern Mediterranean. Chroniclers repeatedly admired one quality above all others. They almost never broke formation, even under tremendous pressure, even when casualties mounted. Individual bravery mattered less than collective discipline. One knight alone could accomplish little. A disciplined unit could change the course of a battle. Not everyone within the order fought. Far from it. The Hospitallers gradually developed a remarkably sophisticated organization. Knight brothers formed the military elite. Sergeants served as professional soldiers and administrators. Chaplains cared for spiritual needs. Physicians treated patients. Craftsmen repaired armor. Blacksmiths forged horseshoes. Carpenters maintained buildings. Cooks prepared meals. Stable masters cared for horses. Scribes copied documents by candlelight. Entire communities existed behind castle walls. Each person contributed differently. Together, they sustained an institution stretching across Europe and the Holy Land. Communication itself became an extraordinary challenge. Imagine attempting to manage estates in England, vineyards in France, warehouses in Italy, and castles in Syria without telephones, railroads, or even reliable roads. Letters traveled by horse, then by ship, then by another horse. Storms delayed them. Pirates intercepted them. Messengers occasionally disappeared altogether. News often arrived months late. Yet somehow the system worked. Not perfectly, never perfectly, but well enough to support hospitals thousands of miles from the farms that financed them. The administrative skill required remains astonishing. One begins to suspect the Hospitallers would have managed email rather efficiently. The order also continued expanding its hospitals. Jerusalem remained the greatest, but other Crusader cities established hospitaller houses. Acre, Tripoli, Antioch. Pilgrims arriving sick or wounded found familiar white crosses waiting. The brothers never abandoned their original purpose. Even as castles multiplied, hospitals remained sacred. This balance distinguished them from many contemporaries. The sword protected the hospital. The hospital justified the sword. At least that was how the brothers understood their mission. The Holy Land itself remained a place of breathtaking beauty. Spring transformed rocky hills into carpets of wildflowers. Almond trees blossomed. Migrating birds crossed endless blue skies. Fresh water sparkled beneath ancient bridges. Then summer arrived. Relentlessly, European knights discovered that armor and 40-degree heat formed a deeply unpleasant partnership. Mail shirts trapped warmth. Helmets became ovens. Water vanished rapidly. Campaigns demanded endurance beyond simple courage. Many northern Europeans had never imagined such climates. The land itself became another adversary. A silent one, patient, unforgiving. Relations with local populations proved far more complicated than simple warfare. Christians, Muslims, Jews, Armenians, Greeks, Syrians. Merchants traded across religious boundaries. Farmers cultivated fields regardless of who claimed political authority. Doctors exchanged medical knowledge. Translators moved constantly between languages. Daily life required cooperation even when politics encouraged conflict. The medieval Holy Land was rarely divided into neat categories. Reality stubbornly resisted simplicity, as it usually does. Still, danger never disappeared. Small raids remained common. Border skirmishes erupted frequently. Hospitaller patrols responded almost routinely. Sometimes battles lasted minutes, sometimes hours. Most never entered famous chronicles. History tends to remember great victories, not the countless quiet successes that prevented disasters from occurring. Yet those ordinary patrols mattered enormously. Every safe caravan, every protected village, every pilgrim who reached Jerusalem alive represented another unseen triumph. Perhaps the most meaningful victories leave the fewest monuments. By the 1160s and 1170s, however, a new political force was quietly gathering strength beyond Crusader borders. Its leader possessed remarkable patience, remarkable intelligence, remarkable determination. Unlike many rulers before him, he dreamed not merely of local power but of unity. His name was Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub. To Europe, he would become known simply as Saladin. He was not yet the legendary commander history remembers, but he was becoming something extraordinarily dangerous. Not because he loved war, because he understood politics. He united rivals, negotiated alliances, reformed armies, built loyalty, patiently, methodically. The Crusader states had spent decades benefiting from divisions among their enemies. Saladin intended to end those divisions forever, and he very nearly succeeded. The Hospitallers watched these developments with growing concern. Reports arrived from scouts. Messengers carried troubling news. More troops gathering, more cooperation among Muslim rulers, more disciplined leadership emerging beyond the frontier. Inside castles like Krak the Chevaliers, preparations quietly intensified. Granaries filled, weapons multiplied, walls received fresh repairs. No one knew exactly when the next great war would come, only that it almost certainly would. The Holy Land had entered another calm before another storm. and storms in this land had a habit of reshaping history. As evening settles over Krak de Chevaliers, the setting sun paints its mighty walls in shades of amber and crimson. Watchmen climb the towers. A horn sounds softly across the valley. Far below, shepherds gather their flocks. Smoke rises from distant villages. Inside the great hall, brothers finish another simple meal before gathering once more in the chapel. The same voices that practiced warfare all afternoon now sing ancient prayers beneath vaulted stone ceilings. Outside rests an arsenal of swords, lances, shields, and armor. Inside burns candlelight. It is a strange balance. Violence and mercy, strength and humility, stone and silence. The Hospitallers believe they can carry both without losing either. History is about to test that belief more severely than ever before. Beyond the eastern horizon, Saladin is preparing. The Kingdom of Jerusalem has little idea how profoundly the next decade will change its fate. The castles stand ready. The hospitals remain open. The brothers continue praying. And somewhere, carried by the warm desert wind, the future is already approaching. Saladin, the horns of Hattin, and the fall of Jerusalem. The night air over the Holy Land carries an unusual stillness. It drifts across vineyards planted by generations who had learned to survive beneath changing rulers. It slips through the arrow slits of Hospitaller castles and rustles the canvas tents of soldiers camped along distant frontiers. Somewhere in the darkness, jackals call to one another across rocky hills. Somewhere else, a monk lights one final candle before closing the chapel doors. For a few precious hours, everything feels peaceful. History enjoys moments like these. It often pauses just before changing forever. The brothers of the Hospital of St. John cannot yet know it, but they are living through the final quiet years of the First Crusader Kingdom. The hospitals remain busy. Pilgrims continue arriving. Patrols still escort travelers safely between ports and holy places. The castles still seem invincible. Yet across the deserts and fertile valleys beyond their borders, another story is unfolding. A story that does not begin with a battle. It begins with patience. Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, Saladin, as he would become known throughout Europe, was not the sort of commander who rushed headlong into disaster. Unlike many rulers of his age, he understood that lasting victories were rarely won by dramatic charges alone. Empires, much like gardens, required careful tending. When Saladin first rose to prominence, the Islamic world was deeply divided. Egypt was ruled by one dynasty, Syria by another. Local emirs argued with one another. Political rivalries consumed enormous amounts of energy. The Crusader states had survived for decades partly because their neighbors spent nearly as much time fighting each other as fighting the Christians. Saladin intended to change that. Slowly, patiently, almost quietly, he negotiated alliances, married into influential families, rewarded loyal followers, replaced unreliable governors, expanded his influence city by city, province by province. He united Egypt, then much of Syria, then northern Mesopotamia. By the 1180s, he controlled resources that no Muslim ruler had possessed since before the First Crusade. That alone was alarming enough. But Saladin possessed another quality that made him especially dangerous. He could wait. Waiting is perhaps the least glamorous military strategy ever invented. It rarely appears in paintings. No one commissions statues of generals sitting patiently. Yet history repeatedly rewards those willing to postpone immediate glory. Saladin watched the Crusader kingdom carefully. He learned its strengths, its weaknesses, its rivalries, its personalities, and the Kingdom of Jerusalem offered him plenty to study. Because beneath its impressive castles and holy reputation, the kingdom was becoming increasingly divided. Its rulers argued constantly. Powerful nobles competed for influence. Marriage alliances became political weapons. Questions of succession poisoned relationships. Some lords advocated caution. Others demanded aggressive campaigns. Some preferred negotiation. Others believed every disagreement required another military expedition. One almost imagines exhausted scribes recording endless meetings while quietly wondering whether everyone involved might simply try getting along for a week. Unfortunately, medieval politics seldom rewarded such optimism. Among the kingdom's most controversial figures stood Reynold of Chatillon. Reynold was brave. No one seriously questioned that. He was also spectacularly unpredictable, and unpredictability can become rather expensive in international diplomacy. He launched raids deep into Muslim territory, attacked caravans, ignored truces, even threatened routes used by pilgrims traveling to Mecca. To Saladin, these actions were more than military provocations. They were personal insults. Repeatedly breaking sworn agreements undermined any possibility of lasting peace. Saladin demanded justice. Reynald remained defiantly unapologetic. The road toward war grew shorter. The Hospitallers found themselves caught in the middle. They had not caused these political tensions, yet they would certainly fight when war came. Their castles strengthened defenses. Hospitals prepared supplies. Messengers rode continuously between fortresses. The brothers knew conflict was approaching. The only uncertainty concerned its timing. By the summer of 1187, the moment had arrived. Saladin gathered an enormous army. Exact numbers remain uncertain. Medieval chroniclers had a charming tendency to multiply enemy forces whenever convenient. Still, there is little doubt that Saladin commanded one of the largest armies the Crusader states had ever faced. Infantry, archers, light cavalry, heavy cavalry, engineers, supply caravans, experienced officers drawn from across his growing empire. It was not merely large. It was organized, disciplined, confident. The Crusader kingdom responded by assembling nearly every available fighting man. This decision made sense. It also carried enormous risks. Leaving castles with minimal garrisons meant concentrating strength for one decisive battle. If they won, the kingdom might survive. If they lost, there would be very little left to defend. Hospitaller knights joined the army. So did the Templars. Alongside feudal lords, mercenaries, infantry, and mounted knights from across the kingdom. It represented perhaps the greatest military force the Crusader states would ever assemble. They marched beneath a scorching July sun toward the hills near the Sea of Galilee, toward a place called Hattin. The landscape itself deserves our attention, because geography often decides battles long before swords are drawn. The hills around Hattin rolled gently across the countryside. Grasslands, rocky slopes, scattered shrubs. In early summer, the vegetation dries beneath relentless heat. Water becomes precious. Shade almost disappears. Anyone marching there in heavy armor quickly discovers the astonishing importance of every single sip from a water skin. The Crusader army needed water desperately. Saladin knew this. Of course he did. Instead of launching an immediate assault, Saladin harassed the advancing army relentlessly. Mounted archers circled constantly. Arrows rained down. Not enough to destroy the Crusaders. Enough to exhaust them. Enough to slow them. Enough to increase frustration. Every hour beneath the burning sun weakened the Christian army further. Water supplies dwindled. Horses suffered. Men staggered beneath chain mail heated almost beyond endurance. The Hospitallers marched steadily despite the conditions. Professional discipline held, but discipline could not create water. Then came one of the most devastating tactical decisions of the campaign. Saladin's forces set fire to dry grass surrounding the Crusader positions. Smoke drifted across the battlefield. Hot winds carried flames. The air itself became suffocating. Imagine standing beneath a blazing summer sun wearing metal armor while smoke fills your lungs and arrows continue falling around you. It was less a battle than an ordeal. The Crusaders reached the twin volcanic hills known as the Horns of Hattin. There, exhausted and dehydrated, they prepared for the inevitable attack. Morning broke over a nightmare. Saladin's army surrounded the Crusaders. Wave after wave pressed forward. Mounted archers struck from every direction. Heavy cavalry charged vulnerable formations. The Christian army fought with extraordinary courage. Again and again, Hospitaller and Templar knights launched desperate counterattacks. Contemporary chroniclers describe astonishing bravery. Men charging into impossible odds. Standards raised despite overwhelming pressure. Units refusing to surrender ground even as casualties mounted around them. For a time, discipline nearly achieved the impossible. Nearly. The Hospitallers, trained through decades of relentless practice, held formation longer than many others. Their horses crashed into enemy lines. Lances splintered. Swords flashed beneath clouds of dust. Commands disappeared beneath the roar of combat. The white cross remained visible amid chaos. One brother fell. Another took his place. Another. Then another. They fought as they had trained, as a single body. Not seeking individual glory, simply refusing to yield. But bravery cannot always overcome circumstance. The army had been outmaneuvered, outnumbered, outlasted. He'd accomplished what swords alone could not. By afternoon, organized resistance collapsed. Groups became isolated. Standards disappeared. The true cross carried by the Crusader army was captured. King Guy of Jerusalem surrendered. Thousands died. Thousands more became prisoners. It was one of the greatest disasters in Crusader history. The fate of the military orders proved especially tragic. Saladin respected courage. He also recognized the military threat posed by professional warrior monks. Many captured Hospitallers and Templars were offered the opportunity to renounce their vows. Most refused. They had taken lifelong promises seriously. Contemporary Muslim and Christian sources agree that hundreds were executed after the battle. Accounts differ in detail. The tragedy itself remains beyond dispute. For the Hospitallers, Hattin became more than a defeat. It became a martyrdom. Some of the order's finest brothers never left those hills. Their bodies remained where they had fallen beneath the relentless July sun. Saladin himself emerged from the battle with a reputation unlike many conquerors. He treated King Guy with courtesy. When Reynold of Chatillon was brought before him, however, matters unfolded differently. According to medieval chroniclers, Saladin personally executed Reynold for repeatedly violating truces and attacking caravans. To Saladin, justice had finally arrived. To the Crusaders, it marked the end of one of the kingdom's most controversial figures. History seldom offers universally satisfying conclusions, only consequences. After Hattin, the road to Jerusalem lay almost open. One city after another surrendered. Acre, Nablus, Jaffa, Ascalon. Castles isolated by the defeat found themselves unable to resist indefinitely. Hospitaller fortresses continued fighting where possible, but without a field army to relieve them, their position became increasingly desperate. Within months, nearly everything gained during the First Crusade began slipping away, like sand through open fingers. Finally, Saladin reached Jerusalem, the city that had inspired Crusades, the city that had witnessed terrible bloodshed in 1099. Its defenders understood they could not withstand a prolonged siege. Hospitaller survivors joined the defense alongside remaining knights and ordinary townspeople. Women carried stones. Priests organized prayers. Citizens repaired walls. Everyone understood the stakes. Jerusalem was not merely another city. It was the heart of their world. Yet history unfolded differently than it had 88 years earlier. When negotiations began, Saladin chose mercy over massacre. The defenders surrendered. Christian inhabitants were allowed to ransom themselves. Many poor citizens received assistance. Some were freed through charitable payments made by religious orders, including surviving Hospitallers. There was suffering, displacement, loss, but not the wholesale slaughter that had accompanied the Crusader conquest decades before. Even medieval chroniclers noted the contrast. On October 2nd, 1187, Jerusalem passed peacefully into Saladin's hands. The golden dome of the rock remained untouched. Churches continued functioning. Pilgrims would eventually return under negotiated agreements. The Holy City had changed rulers once more. The Hospitallers lost the place where their story had begun. The hospital founded by Brother Gerard. The wards where thousands had been healed. The streets they had walked for nearly a century. All gone. Not destroyed, but no longer theirs. Imagine the surviving brothers leaving the city. Some wounded, some grieving, some carrying little more than the clothes beneath their black robes. The place that had shaped their identity disappeared behind them. Everything familiar vanished beyond the horizon. Hospitals abandoned. Friends buried. Dreams shattered. Many organizations would have collapsed under such circumstances. The Hospitallers did not, because they had learned something during nearly a century of service. Their true home had never been a city. It had been their mission. Hospitals could be rebuilt. Castles could be reclaimed. Communities could begin again. Faith, they believed, could travel. As night falls over Jerusalem once more, the city grows quiet beneath a different banner. The same stars shine above its walls. The same wind moves through ancient olive trees. Somewhere in the distance, church bells answer the evening call to prayer. Empires have changed. Rulers have changed. Yet the city remains, waiting patiently for the next generation to believe they can hold it forever. The surviving Hospitallers march north toward the coast, weary but unbroken. Ahead lies Acre. Ahead lie new battles. Ahead lies exile. And beyond even that, an entirely new chapter that none of them could yet imagine. The Order of St. John has lost Jerusalem. It has not lost itself. Acre, the last light of Outremer. The Mediterranean is strangely peaceful at dawn. Its waves roll gently onto pale beaches with little concern for kings, crusades, or kingdoms. Fishing boats drift quietly beyond the harbor. Gulls circle above the sea walls, loudly debating ownership of a particularly unfortunate fish. Salt hangs in the morning air, mingling with the smell of tar, fresh timber, damp rope, and bread just beginning to bake inside the city's ovens. If you had arrived by ship in the late 12th century, the first thing you would have noticed was not a cathedral, nor a castle. It was movement. Everywhere. Merchants shouting in Italian. Pilgrims unloading baggage. Blacksmiths hammering iron. Dockworkers carrying barrels of wine and sacks of grain. Camels kneeling beside Venetian warehouses. Horses waiting impatiently on stone streets polished smooth by thousands of footsteps. This was Acre, a city that seemed to contain half the known world inside its walls. And after the loss of Jerusalem, it would become the beating heart of the Crusader states. For the surviving Hospitallers, the journey north after Hattin had been one of grief. Many brothers had died. Others remained prisoners. Their beloved hospital in Jerusalem was lost. The holy city itself had passed into Saladin's hands. Everything that had defined the order for nearly a century had vanished within a matter of months. It would have been understandable to surrender to despair. History contains countless organizations that simply disappeared after disasters far smaller than this. The Hospitallers chose another path. They rebuilt, because rebuilding had always been part of their nature. After all, every patient who entered their hospital represented someone trying to recover from catastrophe. Perhaps now the order itself had become the patient. At first, their future seemed uncertain. Saladin now controlled nearly everything the Crusaders had conquered during the First Crusade. Only a handful of coastal fortresses remained in Christian hands. Tyre, defended brilliantly by Conrad of Montferrat, refused to surrender. Its survival became enormously important. Ships arriving from Europe still had somewhere to land. Reinforcements still had a gateway into the Holy Land. Without Tyre, the Crusader presence might have ended altogether. Instead, history offered one final chance. News of Jerusalem's fall spread across Europe like wildfire. Church bells rang in sorrow. Kings gathered councils. Monasteries held prayers. Pilgrims wept. For Christians across Europe, the loss of the Holy City felt almost unimaginable. The response came quickly. Another crusade. This would become known as the Third Crusade. And unlike many earlier expeditions, this one attracted some of the most powerful rulers in Europe. 3 kings answered the call. Frederick Barbarossa, Holy Roman Emperor. Philip II of France. Richard I of England. Richard the Lionheart. It sounded impressive. It also sounded like the beginning of several inevitable political arguments. Because whenever medieval kings traveled together, disagreements packed their own luggage. Before those famous rulers even reached the Holy Land, however, another struggle had already begun. The city of Acre. Captured by Saladin after Hattin, Acre now became the focus of an enormous siege. Crusader forces surrounded the city. Saladin surrounded the Crusaders. The defenders inside Acre resisted fiercely. The result was one of history's strangest military situations. An army besieging a city, while another army besieged the besiegers. It was, from a logistical perspective, wonderfully complicated. Medieval supply officers likely questioned every career decision that had brought them there. The Hospitallers threw themselves into the struggle. Their numbers had been devastated at Hattin. Still they fought. Still they served. The hospital tents behind the front lines filled constantly. Wounded soldiers arrived by the hundreds. Arrow wounds, sword cuts, broken bones, heat exhaustion, dysentery, malaria, Disease claimed almost as many lives as combat itself, sometimes more. The brothers returned to their oldest mission, healing, even while battles raged only a short distance away. Imagine the sounds surrounding Acre. The crash of waves against harbor walls, catapults hurling stones across the sky, church bells calling the faithful to prayer, the deep thud of siege engines striking ancient masonry, merchants attempting to continue business despite everything. Somehow life persisted. Children still played in narrow streets. Fishermen still cast their nets. Bakers still rose before dawn. History rarely pauses ordinary life simply because extraordinary events are occurring nearby. The siege lasted almost 2 years. Nearly 2 years. Think about that. Modern wars often move at astonishing speed. Medieval sieges moved according to entirely different rhythms. Days blurred into weeks. Weeks into months. Season after season passed. Summer heat gave way to winter rain. Winter rain surrendered once more to blazing sunshine. Thousands lived beneath canvas tents year after year. Mud replaced dust. Dust replaced mud. Food spoiled. Clothing wore out. Tempers certainly wore out. Yet neither side surrendered. Disease became the great equalizer. Kings became ill. Knights became ill. Ordinary laborers became ill. No title protected anyone from contaminated water or crowded camps. Hospitaller physicians worked without rest. Ancient medical knowledge drawn from Greek scholars, Roman traditions, and Islamic physicians all found practical application. The order had never cared where useful knowledge originated. If a treatment saved lives, they embraced it. Medicine ignored political borders more effectively than armies ever could. Then, in the summer of 1191, the balance finally shifted. Richard the Lionheart arrived. Even before setting foot in the Holy Land, Richard had become something of a legend. He was fearless, charismatic, exceptionally skilled in battle. He also possessed an ego fully capable of filling several castles simultaneously. The combination proved memorable. Still, few doubted his military ability. His arrival transformed morale almost overnight. Fresh troops landed. New siege engines appeared. The assault intensified. Philip II of France had already arrived. For a brief moment, two of Europe's greatest monarchs stood side by side before Acre's walls. It might have marked the beginning of a glorious partnership. Instead, they argued. Frequently. Because of course they did. Medieval kings possessed an almost supernatural ability to compete even while facing common enemies. Fortunately for the Crusaders, their soldiers performed rather better than their politicians. On July 12, 1191, Acre surrendered. Its defenders marched out. The Crusaders marched in. Church bells rang. Flags changed. The city once again belonged to the Crusader states. For the Hospitallers, it represented something even greater. A new beginning. Since Jerusalem remained under Saladin's control, Acre gradually became the new headquarters of the military orders. The Hospitallers established magnificent new buildings. Hospitals, warehouses, administrative offices, barracks, chapels. The city expanded rapidly. Merchants from Genoa, Venice, and Pisa competed fiercely for influence. European goods arrived constantly. Spices departed westward. Silks, glass, sugar, olive oil. Ideas traveled alongside cargo. So did rumors. Usually much faster. The Hospitaller Hospital in Acre became one of the finest medical institutions in medieval Europe. Visitors described enormous wards, clean bedding, fresh water, nutritious meals, separate facilities for different illnesses. Brothers moved quietly among patients carrying herbs, bread, wine diluted with water, and carefully prepared medicines. Rich pilgrims received treatment. Poor pilgrims received treatment. Muslims occasionally received treatment. So did Jews. The rule of the order emphasized charity first. Illness cared very little about religious identity. The brothers often followed that example. Life inside Acre differed greatly from life in Jerusalem. Jerusalem had been a sacred city. Acre was a commercial one. Money flowed through its streets. Ships arrived daily. Languages mixed constantly. French, Arabic, Italian, Greek, Armenian, English, German. The city buzzed with commerce from sunrise until long after sunset. Its harbor became one of the busiest in the Mediterranean. For the Hospitallers, this meant opportunity. Donations arrived more efficiently. Supplies flowed more regularly. Communication with Europe improved. The order flourished once again. Meanwhile, Richard the Lionheart continued campaigning against Saladin. The two commanders became legendary opponents. Curiously, they never actually met face to face. Yet mutual respect gradually developed. Richard admired Saladin's leadership. Saladin admired Richard's courage. Stories, some true, some almost certainly embellished, spread throughout Europe and the Islamic world. Saladin reportedly sent fruit and snow to cool Richard during illness. Richard praised Muslim cavalry. Whether every tale happened exactly as described hardly matters. They reveal something important. Even amid war, admiration sometimes survived. Humanity occasionally found unexpected places to hide. Eventually, neither side achieved complete victory. Richard won battles. Saladin retained Jerusalem. The Third Crusade concluded with negotiation rather than conquest. Pilgrims once again gained access to the Holy City. Christian kingdoms retained portions of the coast. Neither side obtained everything it wanted, which, historically speaking, often defines successful diplomacy. For the Hospitallers, however, the reality remained sobering. Jerusalem was still lost. Their mission continued. Hospitals remained busy. Castles remained occupied. Pilgrims still required protection. But the balance of power had changed forever. The Crusader states no longer looked outward with confidence. They looked inward with caution. Every passing decade felt increasingly uncertain. Yet outwardly, Acre seemed almost invincible. Its walls grew stronger. Its harbor busier. Its wealth greater. Hospitaller headquarters expanded into an enormous complex complete with vaulted halls, impressive courtyards, and warehouses overflowing with supplies from Europe. Visitors marveled at the efficiency. Letters arrived from England. Donations from France. Grain from Sicily. Wine from Cyprus. The order had become a truly international institution. One of the most sophisticated organizations in medieval Christendom. Still, stone walls cannot stop time. Generations changed. Young knights replaced old veterans. Children born after Hattin grew into adults knowing only Acre, never Jerusalem. Memories slowly became stories. Stories slowly became legends. The dream of reclaiming the Holy City remained alive, but it grew increasingly distant, like a mountain visible across a widening sea. As twilight settles over Acre, lanterns begin appearing one by one along the harbor. Ships rock gently with the evening tide. The smell of salt and fresh bread drifts through crowded streets. Inside the Hospitaller hospital, brothers quietly change bandages by candlelight. Outside, armored knights patrol beneath walls that seem strong enough to last forever. They cannot know that another century will bring another storm. Far beyond the eastern deserts, a new power is rising. Not under Saladin, not under the Ayyubids. A people unlike any enemy the Crusader states have yet encountered. The Mongols will shake the world. The Mamluks will rise from slavery to empire. And one day, the walls of Acre themselves will face a siege unlike any before. For now, though, the city sleeps. Its churches stand. Its harbor bustles. Its hospitals heal. Its knights keep watch beneath a sky filled with stars reflected upon the quiet Mediterranean. The last great Crusader city still shines. But even the brightest lighthouse cannot hold back the coming tide forever. The fall of Acre, the last day of the Crusader kingdom. The sea remembers. Long after kings have disappeared into dusty chronicles and castles have become silent ruins, the Mediterranean continues its endless conversation with the shore. Gentle waves rise and fall against the harbor walls of Acre exactly as they did centuries ago. They do not care who rules the city. They do not remember treaties. They do not celebrate victories. They simply arrive. Again, and again, and again. If you were standing upon Acre's great walls sometime around the year 1280, you might have believed those walls would stand forever. They were enormous. Layer upon layer of limestone surrounded the city like the rings of an ancient tree. Massive towers overlooked both land and sea. Deep ditches protected vulnerable approaches. Powerful gates forced visitors through twisting entrances designed to confuse attackers. The Hospitallers had helped strengthen these defenses for generations. So had the Templars. So had kings, merchants, engineers, and countless laborers whose names have long since disappeared from history. Every stone represented hope. Every tower represented another promise that the Christian presence in the Holy Land would endure. Unfortunately, stone cannot solve every problem. Almost a century had passed since Saladin recaptured Jerusalem. An entire generation had lived and died. Children born after the Third Crusade had become grandparents. To them, Acre, not Jerusalem, was the center of Crusader life. The city flourished. Its harbor remained crowded with ships from Venice, Genoa, Pisa, Marseille, Barcelona, and London. Markets overflowed with spices carried from India, silks from distant Asia, glass from Syria, sugar from local plantations, wool from England, wine from Cyprus. Every morning, merchants argued over prices in half a dozen languages before breakfast. Some traditions are truly timeless. The Hospitallers had rebuilt themselves magnificently. Their headquarters in Acre resembled a small city within the city. Visitors described immense vaulted halls supported by enormous stone pillars, warehouses filled with grain, armories stacked with weapons, stables housing powerful horses, administrative offices managing estates that stretched across Europe. And at the heart of it all, the hospital. It remained astonishingly advanced for its time. Patients received clean beds, fresh food, separate wards, medical care. Brothers moved quietly through long corridors carrying oil lamps after sunset, checking the sick one by one. Nearly 2 centuries had passed since Brother Gerard first cared for exhausted pilgrims in Jerusalem. His spirit still lingered here, even amid military preparations, even beneath castle walls. Healing remained the order's soul. Yet beyond Acre's bustling markets, the political landscape was changing once again. Saladin's great empire had fragmented after his death in 1193. His descendants argued. Territories divided. Power shifted repeatedly. For a time, the Crusader states benefited from these familiar rivalries. Then history performed another unexpected turn. A new force emerged from Egypt. The Mamluks. Their story was extraordinary. Many had begun life as enslaved boys purchased from distant lands, trained as elite soldiers, converted to Islam, educated in warfare from childhood, disciplined, loyal, highly professional. Eventually, these soldiers seized power themselves. Former slaves became sultans. History possesses a remarkable sense of irony. Among the Mamluk rulers, one name struck fear throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Sultan Baybars. Tall, energetic, brilliant, relentless. Where Saladin had often preferred diplomacy alongside warfare, Baybars embraced constant pressure. Castle after castle fell before him. Fortresses once considered impregnable gradually surrendered. Some resisted bravely. Others negotiated. Many simply discovered that no wall could withstand endless assaults forever. The Hospitallers fought desperately to preserve their frontier. Their greatest fortress, Krak de Chevaliers, still dominated the hills of Syria. Its walls remained magnificent, its reputation almost mythical. For generations, travelers had called it nearly impossible to capture. In 1271, Baybars arrived. He understood something important. Strength alone would not defeat Krak. Cleverness might. According to medieval accounts, Baybars used forged letters supposedly sent by the Grand Master of the Hospitallers, instructing the garrison to surrender because relief would never come. Whether every detail of the story is perfectly accurate remains debated. Medieval chroniclers occasionally appreciated dramatic storytelling. But one fact is beyond dispute. Krak surrendered. After nearly 130 years under Hospitaller control, one of the greatest castles in the world had fallen. Not because its walls collapsed, because history had shifted around it. Imagine the brothers walking through those familiar halls one final time. The chapel where they had prayed every dawn. The stable yard where generations of horses had waited patiently before patrols. The kitchens where simple meals had nourished defenders through long winters. The towers from which watchmen had scanned distant horizons. Everything remained physically intact, yet none of it belonged to them anymore. Sometimes defeat arrives quietly, not with fire, not with explosions, only with footsteps walking away. One by one, other Crusader strongholds disappeared. The frontier shrank. Villages emptied. Farmland was abandoned. Trade routes shifted. Every year, Acre grew more isolated. The sea became its lifeline. Without European ships constantly arriving, the city could not survive. Fortunately, Europe remained deeply invested. Unfortunately, Europe also remained deeply distracted. Kings argued with neighboring kingdoms. Popes disputed with emperors. Resources became increasingly difficult to gather. Calls for another great crusade echoed through cathedrals. Few answered. The age of massive crusading armies was fading. Inside Acre itself, another danger quietly developed. Division. The military orders argued. Italian merchant republics quarreled. Nobles competed for influence. Political factions multiplied. Venetians disliked Genoese merchants. Genoese disliked Venetians. Everyone occasionally disliked everyone else. It is one of history's less admirable constants. Communities often become most divided precisely when unity matters most. The Hospitallers generally maintained discipline, but they could not repair every political fracture surrounding them. Then came the spark. In 1291, violence erupted between Crusaders and Muslim merchants inside Acre. The exact details remain uncertain. Accounts conflict. Some describe drunken soldiers attacking civilians. Others present different sequences of events. Whatever happened, the consequences proved catastrophic. The fragile peace collapsed. The new Mamluk Sultan, Al-Ashraf Khalil, seized the opportunity. A massive army marched toward Acre. This time, there would be no relief. The siege began in April 1291. Imagine standing upon Acre's walls, looking east, watching an ocean of tents appear across the landscape. Siege engines, engineers, archers, infantry, cavalry. Thousands upon thousands of soldiers. The Mamluks surrounded the city. Their banners stretched almost beyond sight. The defenders understood immediately. This would be the final battle. The Hospitallers prepared calmly. Their discipline never deserted them. Hospitals stocked supplies. Churches held continuous prayers. Blacksmiths repaired armor day and night. Women carried water. Children assisted wherever possible. Merchants became soldiers. Monks became engineers. Every available hand joined the defense. The city itself transformed into one enormous fortress. Day after day, Mamluk siege engines battered the walls. Enormous stones crashed into towers. Dust filled the air. Archers exchanged endless volleys. Engineers dug tunnels beneath foundations. Countermines answered them underground. Sometimes the fighting happened beneath the earth itself. Dark, claustrophobic, terrifying. History often remembers glorious cavalry charges. It speaks less often about men digging toward one another through darkness carrying picks instead of swords. Inside the Hospitaller hospital, the wounded arrived without pause. The corridors overflowed. Doctors worked until exhaustion blurred into habit. Brothers washed wounds with wine, applied herbal poultices, changed bandages, offered prayers. Sometimes there was little else to offer. Medicine possessed limits. Compassion did not. The bombardment intensified. One tower collapsed. Another cracked. Sections of wall crumbled beneath relentless assault. Still the defenders fought. Hospitaller knights launched counterattacks. Templars reinforced weakened positions. Crossbowmen fired until their fingers bled. For weeks, the city refused to die. Then, on May 18th, 1291, the final assault began. Mamluk forces surged through breaches in the walls. Street fighting erupted immediately. Every intersection became a battlefield. Every building a fortress. Hospitaller brothers fought beside ordinary citizens. Merchants who had once argued over spice prices now defended barricades with axes and spears. Priests carried the wounded between collapsing buildings. Smoke filled the streets. Church bells rang desperately above the roar of combat. The Grand Master of the Hospitallers, Jean de Villiers, was gravely wounded while leading the defense. Despite his injuries, surviving brothers managed to carry him toward the harbor. Many refused to retreat. They remained behind to protect civilians attempting to reach waiting ships. One by one, defensive positions disappeared. Yet the White Cross continued appearing wherever resistance remained strongest. The harbor became chaos. Families crowded onto vessels. Children cried. Sailors shouted. Horses plunged into the sea. Treasure was abandoned. Documents disappeared. Relics vanished. Centuries of history scattered across docks soaked with seawater and blood. The Hospitallers loaded as many wounded as possible aboard their ships. Not everyone could be saved. Perhaps that realization hurt more than defeat itself. One final stronghold remained: the Great Templar fortress beside the harbor. Hospitallers assisted where they could, but organized resistance had effectively ended. Days later, even that fortress collapsed. Acre had fallen. The last major Crusader city in the Holy Land was gone. Nearly 200 years after the First Crusade captured Jerusalem, the Latin kingdom had ceased to exist. Silence followed. Not immediately. Battles rarely end quietly, but eventually, smoke drifted upward. The harbor emptied. The churches stood abandoned. Hospitals that had cared for generations closed their doors forever. The brothers who survived looked west across the Mediterranean. Home was no longer ahead of them. Home was somewhere beyond the sea. Many people assumed this was the end of the Hospitallers. It would have been a reasonable conclusion. Their hospitals lost. Their castles lost. Their headquarters lost. Their kingdom gone. Yet the order had survived Hattin. It had survived Jerusalem. It had survived countless disasters already. It would survive this one too, because the Hospitallers had slowly become something larger than the Holy Land itself. Their estates still stretched across Europe. Their brothers still served in dozens of countries. Their mission still lived. If they could no longer defend Jerusalem, perhaps they would defend Christianity somewhere else. History was about to carry them onto an island, then another, where they would reinvent themselves once again. Night falls over the ruins of Acre. The waves continue washing gently against broken harbor stones. The same sea that once carried triumphant crusaders now carries weary survivors toward an uncertain future. Somewhere aboard one of those ships, wounded brothers stare silently back toward the disappearing coastline. No speeches, no grand declarations. Only the quiet understanding that an age has ended. Behind them lies the Holy Land. Ahead lies Cyprus, then Rhodes, then Malta. The story of the Hospitallers is far from over. In many ways, it is only just beginning. Exiles upon the sea, the birth of the Knights of Rhodes. The Mediterranean has always been a sea of departures. Every sunrise reveals ships slipping beyond the horizon, while others appear as little more than distant silhouettes against the morning light. Some carry merchants dreaming of profit. Some carry pilgrims searching for salvation. Others carry armies convinced that history will remember them kindly. And sometimes, they carry refugees. Not ordinary refugees, perhaps. These passengers wear battered mail armor beneath worn black cloaks embroidered with white crosses. Their swords are chipped. Their horses, those that survived it all, stand uneasily in cramped wooden transports. The men themselves are exhausted beyond words. Behind them, somewhere over the western horizon, Acre is burning. Ahead, only uncertainty. The sea offers no promises, only possibilities. When the last Hospitaller ships disappeared from the harbor of Acre in the spring of 1291, they carried far more than wounded knights. They carried the memory of 2 centuries. The memory of Brother Gerard's humble hospital. The memory of Jerusalem. Of Krak the Chevaliers. Of pilgrims rescued on lonely roads. Of brothers buried beneath distant olive trees. Everything the Order had built in the Holy Land now existed only in memory. It would have been easy to believe that their purpose had ended. After all, how could the guardians of the Holy Land remain guardians when the Holy Land itself had been lost? It was a question with no obvious answer. For a while, even the Hospitallers did not know. Their first destination was Cyprus, a beautiful island lying just west of the Levant. Green mountains rose above vineyards and forests of pine. Small villages dotted fertile valleys. Monasteries clung to rocky hillsides. Along the coast, harbors welcomed merchants from every corner of the Mediterranean. Compared with the battlefields they had left behind, Cyprus seemed almost peaceful. Almost. Because peace often hides its own complications. Cyprus was ruled by the Lusignan dynasty, descendants of crusading nobles who had established a kingdom there after the Third Crusade. King Henry II welcomed the surviving military orders. Hospitallers, Templars, refugees from the fallen Crusader states. The island suddenly became the center of what remained of Latin Christianity in the Eastern Mediterranean. At first, the arrangement seemed practical. The Hospitallers rebuilt hospitals, organized supplies, re-established communication with Europe. Ships once destined for Acre now sailed to Cypriot ports. The order still possessed vast estates across Europe. Money continued arriving. Food continued arriving. New recruits continued arriving. They had survived. But surviving is not the same thing as belonging. Imagine the conversations held inside their temporary headquarters. Stone halls lit by flickering candles. Maps spread across heavy wooden tables. The coastline of Palestine carefully drawn in fading ink. One brother traces the outline of Jerusalem with his finger. Another quietly rolls up the map. Silence follows. No one needs to explain what everyone already knows. They cannot simply wait. The Hospitallers were too large, too wealthy, too organized to remain guests forever. Sooner or later, they would need a home of their own. Their new Grand Master, Fawkes de Villaret, understood this perfectly. He was an experienced leader, practical, determined, perhaps even a little ambitious. History rarely grants leadership to those entirely lacking ambition. Villaret recognized that the order needed independence. If they remained permanently dependent upon the King of Cyprus, political conflicts would eventually weaken them. Hospitals required stability. Military forces required secure bases. Administration required territory under their own authority. The solution lay somewhere beyond the horizon. An island, strong enough to defend, well-positioned for trade, close enough to the eastern Mediterranean to continue their mission, yet independent of local kings. Finding such a place would not be easy. Taking it, even harder. Their attention gradually settled upon Rhodes. Today, Rhodes is famous for sunshine, beaches, and tourists carrying cameras. 700 years ago, it represented something rather different. Opportunity. The island lay near the southwestern coast of Anatolia, controlling important sea routes between Europe and the eastern Mediterranean. Whoever ruled Rhodes could observe merchant shipping, naval movements, and communication across much of the region. The Byzantine Empire still claimed the island. In reality, imperial authority there had become increasingly fragile. Local governors often acted independently. Pirates appeared with uncomfortable frequency. Political confusion created possibilities. The Hospitallers noticed. Naturally. Beginning around 1306, negotiations quietly began. Not all conquests required dramatic battles. Sometimes they begin with contracts, secret agreements, promises, payments. One local Byzantine noble reportedly agreed to assist the Hospitallers in exchange for support. Whether everyone involved fully understood the consequences remains uncertain. History is filled with people making agreements they later regretted. The campaign unfolded gradually. Hospitaller ships sailed eastward. Knights landed at carefully chosen points. Some towns resisted. Others surrendered. Castles changed hands one by one. The fighting lasted several years rather than several days. Rhodes refused to become anyone's possession without argument. Fair enough. It had spent centuries watching empires come and go. Finally, in 1309, the city of Rhodes itself fell. For the first time since the loss of Acre, the Hospitallers possessed a sovereign home. No king ruled above them. No local prince commanded them. The Grand Master became not merely the leader of a religious order, but the ruler of an island state. It was an extraordinary transformation. Brother Gerard, tending sick pilgrims in Jerusalem 2 centuries earlier, could scarcely have imagined such a future. His humble hospital had become an independent maritime power. History has a wonderfully peculiar sense of direction. Work began immediately. The Hospitallers did what they always did. They built. Hospitals appeared first. Of course they did. Even after generations of warfare, healing remained instinctive. Then came churches, warehouses, arsenals, shipyards, administrative buildings. Most importantly, walls. Great walls. Because if history had taught them anything, it was this. Eventually, someone would try to take everything away again. Better to prepare in advance. The fortifications of Rhodes became among the finest in Europe. Engineers expanded medieval walls into an enormous defensive network. Massive towers overlooked the harbor. Deep moats protected vulnerable approaches. Gatehouses forced attackers through carefully designed killing zones. Every angle, every passage, Every staircase served military purpose. Visitors arriving by sea saw stone rising directly from the waterfront. The city seemed less built than carved from the island itself. Unlike the castles of the Holy Land, Rhodes had another advantage: the sea. Everything depended upon the sea. Supplies, trade, communication, defense. The Hospitallers transformed themselves accordingly. They became sailors, shipbuilders, naval commanders. Their fleet grew steadily. Galleys lined the harbor, their long rows of oars ready at a moment's notice. Experienced captains studied currents, winds, and coastlines with the same attention earlier generations had devoted to desert roads. The order was changing once again. No longer guardians of pilgrimage routes, now guardians of the sea. Life inside Rhodes followed rhythms both familiar and entirely new. Morning prayers still echoed through chapels before dawn. The hospitals still welcomed the sick. Meals remained simple. Rules remained strict. Poverty, chastity, and obedience still defined every brother. Yet outside the monastery walls, shipwrights hammered timber, blacksmiths forged anchors, sailmakers stitched enormous canvases, dockworkers loaded barrels of fresh water onto waiting vessels. The soundscape had changed. Instead of camel bells, seagulls. Instead of desert wind, ocean breeze. Instead of distant caravan bells, the creaking of wooden ships. The order itself also became increasingly international. Brothers arrived from nearly every kingdom in Europe: France, England, Germany, Aragon, Italy, Provence, Auvergne. Each region formed what became known as a langue, a tongue, or linguistic division. Each langue maintained its own residence within Rhodes, its own traditions, its own officers, its own responsibilities. Imagine walking through the city. One street filled with French accents, another with German, another with Italian. Latin united them during worship. Service united them in purpose. The order had become a miniature Europe enclosed within fortress walls. The hospital on Rhodes continued astonishing visitors. Travelers described remarkable cleanliness. Patients received individual beds whenever possible, fresh linen, nutritious meals. Physicians trained in the best available medical knowledge. Brothers treated wounds with wine, vinegar, herbs, and careful observation. Surgery remained dangerous. Infection remained common. No miracle medicines existed. Yet compared with most institutions of the age, hospitaller care remained exceptional. Healing, after all, had always been their oldest tradition. Meanwhile, the political world continued changing. To the east, the Ottoman Turks were rising. At first, they appeared merely another regional power among many. Small, energetic, ambitious. Few observers realized they would eventually become one of history's greatest empires. The Hospitallers noticed them early. Ships carrying Ottoman merchants appeared more frequently. Reports arrived from Anatolia. Fortresses fell. Territory expanded. The order quietly strengthened its fleet. Just in case, experience had taught them never to ignore growing powers. Their ships soon became famous throughout the Mediterranean. Part navy, part escort service, part anti-piracy patrol. Occasionally, they intercepted Muslim merchant vessels during periods of war. Sometimes they rescued Christian pilgrims. Sometimes they fought pirates regardless of religion. Sea warfare proved unpredictable. Storms destroyed fleets more efficiently than many admirals. Navigation relied upon stars, coastal landmarks, and experience. One misplaced reef could accomplish what enemy cannon never managed. Evenings on Rhodes possessed a calm unlike anything the brothers had known in Jerusalem. The sea reflected moonlight across the harbor. Fishing boats returned quietly after sunset. Lanterns glowed along stone quays. From the hospital windows came the soft murmur of evening prayers. Beyond the walls, waves broke gently against ancient rocks that had watched Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, and now Hospitallers claimed the island in turn. The sea remained patient. Empires remained temporary. The brothers sometimes climbed the city walls after Compline, the final prayer of the day. Looking east across dark water, they knew that somewhere beyond the horizon lay the Holy Land. Invisible, yet never forgotten. Some had been born there. Others had buried friends there. Many still dreamed of returning. Whether they truly believed it possible hardly mattered anymore. Hope itself had become a form of prayer. As another dawn approaches over Rhodes, bells begin ringing softly through the fortified city. Ships sway gently in the harbor. The White Cross flies once more above strong walls. The Hospitallers have found a new home. But the Mediterranean is changing. Across the narrow waters of Anatolia, the Ottoman Empire grows stronger with every passing decade. One day, its sultans will look toward Rhodes, and they will decide that the island standing across their sea can no longer remain independent. When that day comes, the Hospitallers will face the greatest siege since the fall of Acre. Their walls will be tested. Their courage will be tested. And the future of the order will once again hang upon a handful of determined defenders standing behind stone. The Ottoman storm, the Great Siege of Rhodes. If you stand upon the walls of Rhodes before sunrise, the world feels impossibly quiet. The harbor lies beneath a blanket of silver mist. Fishing boats rock gently against wooden piers. Somewhere below, a baker opens his oven, and the smell of warm bread begins drifting through narrow stone streets. Church bells have not yet rung. The city is suspended between sleeping and waking. Far beyond the eastern horizon, however, another world is already stirring. Campfires burn beneath countless tents. Blacksmiths sharpen blades. Officers study maps by lantern light. Thousands of soldiers prepare for another day of marching. Empires seldom sleep very long, especially growing ones. When the Hospitallers settled on Rhodes in the early 14th century, they had escaped one world and entered another. The Crusades, at least in their original form, had largely faded into history. The great pilgrim kingdoms of Jerusalem, Antioch, and Tripoli existed now only in memory. But the Eastern Mediterranean remained one of the most strategically important regions on Earth. Trade flowed through it. Ideas crossed it. Armies sailed across it. And whoever controlled its islands controlled far more than land. They controlled movement itself. Rhodes occupied one of those crucial positions. From its harbors, Hospitaller ships could watch traffic between Constantinople, Egypt, Syria, Venice, and the Aegean. Merchant convoys passed nearby. Pilgrims sailed nearby. War fleets sailed nearby. Sooner or later, the island would attract unwanted attention. History had become remarkably predictable in that regard. Throughout the 14th century, the order strengthened its island fortress. Every decade brought improvements. Engineers thickened walls. New towers rose. Moats deepened. Storehouses expanded. Fresh water cisterns multiplied beneath the city. Gunpowder had begun changing warfare, and the Hospitallers adapted quickly. Cannons appeared upon their ramparts. Not many at first, but enough to remind visitors that medieval warfare itself was entering a new age. Stone walls still mattered. Yet now they had to survive iron cannonballs as well. Architecture became a race against technology, a race that never truly ends. Meanwhile, across the narrow waters of Anatolia, a remarkable state was expanding with astonishing speed. The Ottoman Empire. What had begun as a relatively small frontier principality during the late 13th century now absorbed neighboring territories almost continuously. One ruler succeeded another. Each generally proved more ambitious than the last. Villages became towns. Towns became provinces. Provinces became an empire stretching across continents. Their armies grew disciplined. Their administration efficient. Their diplomacy sophisticated. Europe noticed. Perhaps not quite early enough. In 1453, the world changed. After a siege lasting 53 days, Sultan Mehmed II captured Constantinople. The ancient Byzantine capital, Rome's eastern heir for more than 1,000 years, finally fell. Church bells across Europe rang in mourning. Scholars fled west carrying precious manuscripts. Merchants reconsidered trade routes. Kings wondered quietly whether they might someday face the same enemy. The Hospitallers looked northeast across the sea. Their closest great Christian neighbor had disappeared. Now, Rhodes stood directly upon the Ottoman frontier. Mehmed II earned a title that echoed throughout history. The Conqueror. He had fulfilled what generations of Muslim rulers had attempted but failed to accomplish. Constantinople belonged to him. Yet conquest rarely satisfies conquerors for long. Maps possess an irritating tendency to suggest further possibilities. And there, only a short voyage away, Lay roads. Independent. Fortified. Christian. Strategically positioned. It represented both an obstacle and an opportunity. The Sultan decided it would eventually become Ottoman. The Hospitallers disagreed. Before open war arrived, daily life on Rhodes continued almost peacefully. The brothers maintained strict routines. The hospital remained active. Pilgrims still visited. Merchants filled the markets. Olive groves covered nearby hills. Children chased one another through sunlit streets. Blacksmiths hammered iron beneath open workshops. Sailors repaired rigging inside the harbor. Visitors sometimes forgot they were standing inside one of the most heavily defended cities in the Mediterranean. Until they looked upward, the walls dominated everything. Immense bastions overlooked every approach. Stone towers cast long afternoon shadows across winding streets. The city seemed permanently prepared for war. Because it was. One of the most remarkable aspects of Rhodes was its organization. Each long of the order defended its own assigned section of wall. The French brothers maintained one bastion, the Germans another, the Italians another, the Aragonese another. Responsibility was shared carefully. If attack came, every brother already knew precisely where he belonged. Preparation replaced panic. Discipline replaced confusion. These habits had been forged through generations of hardship. From Jerusalem, to Acre, to Rhodes, the order never forgot its lessons. The first major Ottoman assault came in 1480. Mehmed II dispatched a powerful army across the sea. Historians still debate exact numbers. Contemporary chroniclers offered figures generous enough to populate several kingdoms. Modern estimates suggest perhaps 60 to 70,000 Ottoman troops confronted roughly 6,000 defenders. Whatever the precise totals, the imbalance was enormous. Rhodes stood alone. Imagine the morning when the fleet appeared. Citizens climbed towers. Lookouts shaded their eyes against brilliant sunlight reflecting from countless sails. Then another ship appeared. And another. Soon the sea itself seemed covered. War galleys. Transport vessels. Supply ships. The horizon disappeared behind canvas and timber. Church bells rang throughout the city. Not in celebration. In warning. The long-expected storm had arrived. Grand Master Pierre de Bussin gathered the defenders calmly. He had prepared for this day throughout his leadership. The walls had been strengthened. Supplies accumulated. Hospitals stocked. Cisterns filled. Weapons inspected. Every available civilian received assignments. Women carried water. Children transported stones. Priests organized continuous prayer. Physicians prepared for casualties. No one imagined the siege would be easy. No one intended surrender. The Ottoman artillery began almost immediately. The sound became relentless. Cannons thundered from dawn until dusk. Great stone walls shuddered beneath repeated impacts. Dust filled the air. Pieces of masonry crashed into city streets. Each explosion echoed across the harbor before fading into silence. Then another followed. And another. Day after day, the bombardment became almost hypnotic. One imagined sleep growing remarkably difficult. Inside the hospital, brothers worked around the clock. Wounded defenders arrived continuously. Broken bones, burns, arrow wounds, shattered limbs caused by collapsing walls. The physicians moved quietly between beds despite exhaustion. Some injuries they could treat. Others, they could only comfort. Medicine had advanced since Brother Gerard's day. Not enough. Human compassion still accomplished what science could not. The Ottoman engineers gradually opened breaches in the walls. Now came the dangerous part. Cannons create opportunities. Infantry exploits them. Wave after wave advanced toward the damaged fortifications. Hospitaller crossbowmen answered. Arquebus fired. Cannons loaded with grapeshot tore gaps through attacking formations. Smoke drifted everywhere. Visibility disappeared. Commands echoed through chaos. The city itself seemed to shake. One attack focused upon the sector defended by the Long of England. Another struck the Spanish position. Again and again, Ottoman soldiers climbed broken walls only to meet determined defenders waiting behind improvised barricades. The fighting became brutally close. Spears, axes, swords, stones, whatever remained available. Every street behind the walls represented another defensive line. Every building another obstacle. The Hospitallers had no room to retreat. Only room to resist. Grandmaster Dubeson personally entered the fighting. He wore full armor despite already advancing in years. Chroniclers describe him appearing wherever danger became greatest, encouraging defenders, leading counterattacks, refusing safety. At one point, he reportedly received multiple serious wounds. Still, he continued. Whether every detail has grown slightly more heroic through centuries of retelling hardly matters. His leadership undeniably inspired extraordinary loyalty. Sometimes courage itself becomes contagious. The siege stretched across weeks. Summer heat intensified everything. Water remained precious. Food rationing became stricter. Fatigue accumulated. Yet the defenders noticed something encouraging. The Ottomans were suffering too. Disease spread through crowded camps. Supply problems emerged. Repeated assaults achieved little permanent success. Each attack cost lives. Each failure weakened morale. Even great empires discover limits. Finally, after nearly 3 months, the impossible happened. The Ottoman army withdrew. Rhodes had survived. Against overwhelming odds. Against one of the greatest military powers in the world. Church bells rang joyfully. Citizens embraced one another in the streets. The wounded smiled despite bandages. The White Cross still flew above the walls. Europe celebrated. The Hospitallers became legends once again. Yet beneath the celebration lingered quiet realism. Pierre d'Aubusson understood something many others preferred to ignore. The Ottomans had failed. They had not disappeared. Empires rarely abandon strategic ambitions after one defeat. They simply prepare more carefully for the next attempt. The Grand Master immediately ordered further improvements. Walls became thicker, bastions stronger, artillery positions expanded, storehouses enlarged. Every lesson purchased in blood became another layer of stone. Life gradually returned to normal. Markets reopened. Ships resumed trading. Pilgrims arrived. The hospital filled once more with ordinary illnesses instead of siege wounds. Children once again played beneath walls that had nearly collapsed around them. The city breathed, recovered, lived. Yet every citizen knew that somewhere across the sea, the Ottoman Empire remained, growing, learning, waiting. 20 years later, Mehmed the Conqueror was gone. Other sultans followed. Then came one whose name would become legendary. Suleiman. Young, brilliant, patient, ambitious. History would remember him as Suleiman the Magnificent. He inherited one of the most powerful empires on earth. Unlike his predecessors, he intended to finish unfinished business. Rhodes remained unconquered. For Suleiman, that was unacceptable. As another peaceful evening settles over the island, lanterns glow softly along Rhodes' magnificent harbor. The brothers gather once more for Compline. Their final prayers drift upward through vaulted ceilings. Outside, gentle waves kiss the harbor walls exactly as they did before the siege. Exactly as they always will. The city has survived, but the sea carries whispers. Across those dark waters, new shipyards are busy. New cannons are being cast. New soldiers are training. The next Ottoman army will be larger. Its artillery stronger. Its young sultan more determined than any before him. The greatest test in the history of the Knights Hospitaller is still to come. And when it arrives, Rhodes will stand alone once again. Suleiman the Magnificent and the last days of Rhodes. The dawn that finally changed Rhodes did not look unusual. The same gulls circled above the harbor. The same fishermen untangled their nets before sunrise. The same church bells echoed through narrow streets paved by generations that had learned to live beneath towering walls. The city awakened exactly as it had for centuries. Children carried baskets of bread. Merchants swept dust from shop entrances. The brothers of the Hospital of St. John gathered for matins, their voices rising softly beneath stone vaults while candles flickered in the darkness. Everything felt familiar. History has a curious habit of disguising its greatest turning points as ordinary mornings. No trumpet announces them. No mysterious clouds gather overhead. The world simply continues, until suddenly it doesn't. By the year 1522, more than 200 years had passed since the Hospitallers first landed on Rhodes. Entire generations had known no other home. Young knights arriving from France or Spain expected to spend years defending these walls. Many imagined they would die here. Some undoubtedly hoped for quieter endings. History, unfortunately, seldom consults our preferences. Across the sea ruled Sultan Suleiman I, only 28 years old, already one of the most formidable rulers in the world. Europe would eventually remember him as Suleiman the Magnificent. The Ottoman world called him Kanuni, the Lawgiver. Both titles suited him. He was not merely a conqueror. He reorganized laws, encouraged architecture, supported scholarship, strengthened administration, expanded trade. His empire stretched across 3 continents and continued growing almost every year. Yet despite commanding unimaginable wealth and armies, one small island continued to interrupt Ottoman control of the eastern Mediterranean. Rhodes. From its harbors, Hospitaller ships still intercepted Ottoman vessels during wartime. The island remained a Christian fortress standing almost directly off the Anatolian coast. For Suleiman, this was more than an inconvenience. It was unfinished business. Unlike some rulers driven by anger, Suleiman prepared with extraordinary care. Months before the campaign, supplies accumulated. Artillery gathered. Engineers studied fortifications. Shipbuilders worked continuously. Thousands of soldiers assembled from every corner of the empire. Infantry, cavalry, engineers, janissaries, sappers, artillery crews, medical personnel, logistics officers. It was less an army than a moving city. The Ottoman state had become astonishingly efficient. One does not build great empires through enthusiasm alone. Someone always has to count the bread. The Hospitallers watched these developments with growing concern. Their Grand Master, Philippe Villiers de l'Isle Adam, understood exactly what was coming. Unlike many leaders throughout history, he possessed no comforting illusions. The siege would happen, soon. The only question concerned whether Rhodes could survive another miracle. Preparations intensified. Food stores expanded. Powder magazines filled. Water cisterns inspected. Every cannon cleaned. Every wall examined. Every brother assigned his station. No one wasted time pretending diplomacy alone would solve the problem. Autumn approached. Then, in June 1522, the horizon darkened. Not with clouds, with sails, hundreds of them. Ottoman ships covered the sea almost beyond sight. Transport vessels, war galleys, supply ships, artillery barges. The fleet stretched across the water like an enormous floating city. Citizens climbed rooftops simply to comprehend its scale. Some prayed. Some stood silently. Some embraced family members a little longer than usual. Everyone understood. History had arrived at their harbor. Modern historians estimate the Ottoman force numbered somewhere between 100,000 and perhaps 200,000 men over the course of the campaign, supported by hundreds of ships. The Hospitallers possessed roughly 600 knights, perhaps 5,000 or 6,000 soldiers altogether, including mercenaries and local defenders. The mathematics appeared discouraging. Fortunately, walls are not built from mathematics. They are built from stone. And courage occasionally ignores arithmetic altogether. The bombardment began. Cannons unlike anything earlier generations had imagined. Bronze monsters capable of throwing enormous stone projectiles across remarkable distances. Day after day they roared. Entire towers trembled. Dust drifted constantly through city streets. Windows shattered. Church roofs cracked. Sections of walls slowly dissolved beneath repeated impacts. The sound became part of daily life. Breakfast accompanied by artillery. Lunch accompanied by artillery. Evening prayers accompanied by artillery. Sleep itself became a negotiation. Inside the city, the Hospitallers followed routines that almost seemed impossible amid such destruction. Morning prayer, wall inspections, hospital rounds, repair work, meals, night watches. The rhythm itself became a source of strength. Routine reminded people they still possessed control over something, even if only the next hour. The hospital once again became the emotional heart of the city. Its corridors filled with wounded defenders. A young crossbowman whose hand had been crushed beneath falling stone. An elderly mason injured while repairing battlements. Children struck by collapsing buildings. Even Ottoman prisoners occasionally found treatment there. The brothers remembered their first calling. Mercy had survived every transformation, even siege warfare. One remarkable feature distinguished the defense of Rhodes. The Longs fought almost like separate families. French brothers defended French bastions. Spanish brothers defended Spanish positions. Italian brothers guarded Italian sectors. Each group competed quietly to prove itself worthy. Healthy rivalry replaced jealousy. No one wished to become the weak point. It produced extraordinary determination. The walls became a patchwork of European accents united beneath one white cross. The Ottoman engineers dug tunnels beneath the fortifications. Mining had become one of the deadliest techniques in siege warfare. Sappers tunneled under walls, supported ceilings with timber, packed chambers with gunpowder, then ignited the charges. Entire sections of fortification exploded upward. The defenders answered by digging countermine tunnels. Imagine underground warfare. Darkness, sweat, the sound of picks striking stone, listening desperately for enemy miners somewhere beyond the next wall of earth. When tunnels finally met, combat unfolded by torchlight beneath the city itself. Claustrophobic hardly begins to describe it. Again and again, breaches appeared. Again and again, the Hospitallers rebuilt them overnight. Women carried baskets of earth. Children hauled stones. Priests blessed exhausted workers. Old men who could scarcely lift swords carried water instead. The defense belonged to everyone, not merely professional soldiers. Rhodes itself seemed determined to survive. Suleiman watched patiently. Unlike many commanders, he resisted reckless assaults. He preferred steady pressure. His artillery continued grinding away at the defenses. His engineers continued advancing. His supply system continued functioning. Time favored the larger army. He knew it. The Hospitallers knew it too. Weeks became months. The Mediterranean summer faded toward autumn. Heat gave way to cooler nights. Still the siege continued. Disease appeared inside both camps. Food grew scarcer within the city. Powder supplies dwindled. Casualties accumulated. Every surviving brother looked older than when the campaign began. Even victory, should it somehow arrive, would demand enormous sacrifice. Grand Master Lyle Adam became the soul of the defense. Like Pierre d'Aubusson decades earlier, he appeared wherever danger grew greatest. Not recklessly, purposefully, encouraging frightened civilians, inspecting damaged walls, speaking quietly with wounded brothers inside the hospital. Leadership often means simply refusing to disappear when everyone else most needs reassurance. He understood that. By December, the situation had become desperate. Large sections of the fortifications lay in ruins. Many experienced defenders had fallen. European reinforcements never arrived. The hope for rescue fleet remained only a rumor. Inside Rhodes, supplies approached exhaustion. Outside, the Ottoman army remained immense. Still disciplined. Still determined. Still there. Then came one of history's most difficult decisions. Not how to fight. Whether to continue fighting. Lyle Adam gathered his senior brothers. The question before them was painful. If resistance continued, the city might eventually fall by storm. If that happened, thousands of civilians could perish. If negotiations began, perhaps lives could be saved. The Hospitallers had always vowed to protect the innocent. Did that duty now require laying down their swords? History rarely presents leaders with choices between good and evil. More often, it offers tragedy or greater tragedy. Negotiations opened with Suleiman. Contrary to later myths portraying endless hatred, both sides respected one another deeply. The Sultan admired the defenders' courage. The Hospitallers recognized Suleiman's discipline and restraint. Terms gradually emerged. The brothers could depart with their weapons. Citizens choosing to leave could do so safely. Those remaining would receive protection. Churches would initially be respected. After nearly 6 months of siege, the fighting ended. On New Year's Day, 1523, the Hospitallers marched out. Imagine that procession. Black robes beneath polished armor. White crosses still visible. Standards held high despite defeat. No cheering crowds. No triumphant music. Only silence. Even many Ottoman soldiers reportedly watched respectfully. They had spent half a year trying to destroy these men. Now they honored them. Courage, it seems, speaks languages politics cannot. Grand Master Lyle Adam paused before boarding his ship. Behind him stood Rhodes. Their home for more than 2 centuries. Ahead, nothing. No island. No headquarters. No certainty. Only the sea. Once again, the order became homeless. Once again, it survived. As the ships slowly departed the harbor, winter sunlight reflected across gentle waves. The walls of Rhodes receded into the distance. Some brothers stood quietly upon the decks. Others prayed. Many simply watched until the island disappeared beneath the horizon. It was the second great exile in the history of the order. First Jerusalem, now Rhodes. One begins to wonder how many homes a single institution can lose without losing itself. The answer, remarkably, was at least two. For years they wandered. Crete, Messina, Civitavecchia, Viterbo. Temporary homes followed temporary homes. European rulers welcomed them warmly. Few could offer what they truly needed: a sovereign base, a place to rebuild, a place from which the mission could continue. Eventually, that offer would come from one of the most powerful men in Europe, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. He would present them with an island many considered too small, too poor, too vulnerable, an island called Malta. Few people realized that this rocky outcrop would become the setting for the greatest chapter in Hospitaller history. There, the White Cross would face the full power of the Ottoman Empire one final time, and the world would never forget the name. The Knights of Malta. Malta, the island that refused to fall. The sea is different around Malta. It is the same Mediterranean that carried crusaders, merchants, fishermen, and emperors for thousands of years, yet here its color seems almost unreal. By morning, the water glows turquoise beneath towering limestone cliffs. By evening, it turns deep blue, almost black, reflecting stars that seem close enough to touch. The islands themselves appear modest. Dry, rocky, windswept. More stone than forest. More dust than fertile fields. If someone had shown you Malta in the year 1530 without telling you its future, you might have politely admired the scenery before asking whether there was perhaps a larger island available. Many people thought exactly that, including some of the Hospitallers. After Jerusalem, after Rhodes, this seemed a rather humble replacement. History, however, has always enjoyed proving first impressions wrong. When Emperor Charles V formally granted Malta to the Hospitallers in 1530, the arrangement seemed almost symbolic. The order would rule Malta, Gozo, and the North African port of Tripoli. In return, every year they would present the King of Sicily with a single Maltese falcon. One bird, a remarkably affordable rent for an entire island. Though one suspects catching the falcon occasionally proved more troublesome than paying taxes, the annual ceremony became famous. Yet behind the charming tradition stood a serious political calculation. Charles V needed a powerful naval order guarding the central Mediterranean. The Hospitallers needed a sovereign home. Their interests aligned perfectly. The brothers arrived cautiously. Rhodes had been magnificent. Malta required imagination. Its main harbor was excellent. That much was obvious. Its natural defenses were impressive. Also obvious. Everything else demanded work. The existing fortifications were modest. Fresh water remained limited. The countryside appeared rugged. Agriculture struggled against thin soil. Many European visitors described the islands as harsh. Others preferred the word bleak. One particularly unkind traveler suggested that even goats looked disappointed. Goats, fortunately, rarely leave written responses. Yet the Hospitallers possessed one extraordinary advantage. They had become experts at beginning again. No organization in Europe understood reinvention quite like the Order of St. John. Jerusalem had taught them charity. The Holy Land had taught them warfare. Rhodes had taught them naval power. Now Malta would teach them endurance. Construction began almost immediately. Walls expanded. Watchtowers rose along the coast. Storehouses filled. Harbors improved. Cannons appeared overlooking every possible landing place. The brothers carefully studied every hill, valley, and shoreline. Where could artillery be placed? Where might enemy ships anchor? Where should civilians shelter? Every lesson learned across 4 centuries shaped their planning. Defeat, they had discovered, was an excellent teacher. Painful, expensive, but effective. Life on Malta settled into familiar rhythms. Morning prayers before dawn, hospital rounds, training exercises, naval patrols, administrative meetings, meals taken in common, evening worship. The vows remained unchanged despite changing homelands. Poverty, chastity, obedience, service. The White Cross remained constant while geography shifted beneath it. Their hospital continued attracting admiration. The brothers never abandoned medicine. Visitors consistently remarked upon cleanliness unusual for the 16th century. Beds remained individual whenever possible. Fresh sheets appeared regularly. Patients received nourishing food rather than simple survival rations. Physicians carefully observed symptoms instead of relying entirely upon superstition. Medical knowledge had advanced considerably since Brother Gerard's era. Not enough to defeat plague, or infection, or countless mysterious illnesses, but enough to save lives that earlier centuries would certainly have lost. Healing remained sacred, even as cannon echoed across the sea. Meanwhile, the Ottoman Empire continued expanding. Belgrade, Rhodes, Hungary, Baghdad. The empire seemed almost unstoppable. Suleiman the Magnificent stood at the height of his power. His armies marched deep into Europe. His fleets dominated much of the Mediterranean. His admirals terrified coastal towns from Greece to Spain. One commander became especially feared, Hayreddin Barbarossa. His red beard gave him the nickname Europeans remembered. His naval brilliance earned him something far more important: respect. Even among enemies, the Hospitallers found themselves increasingly engaged in naval warfare. Their galleys patrolled shipping lanes, protected Christian merchants, attacked Ottoman vessels during wartime. Sometimes they captured ships. Sometimes they rescued prisoners. Sometimes they became prisoners themselves. Life aboard a 16th century galley was remarkably uncomfortable regardless of which flag flew above it. Wooden benches, cramped quarters, salt everywhere. Storms capable of terrifying even experienced sailors. One begins to understand why medieval seafarers prayed so frequently. The order also faced criticism. Not every European admired their naval campaigns. Some merchants complained that Hospitaller privateering disrupted trade. Diplomats occasionally preferred peace over confrontation. The brothers responded with familiar arguments. They believed they defended Christendom, protected pilgrims, guarded sea routes. History rarely produces institutions admired equally by everyone. The Hospitallers were no exception. Then, during the 1560s, intelligence reports became increasingly alarming. Ottoman shipbuilding intensified. Troops assembled. Supplies accumulated. Messengers carried worrying news from Constantinople. The Sultan now ruling the empire, Selim II, intended to succeed where Suleiman ultimately had not. Malta would fall. The Hospitallers had expected this day for decades. Preparation quietly accelerated. Their leader was Jean Parasat de Valette, an aging knight, experienced, disciplined, calm. He had survived imprisonment by Ottoman corsairs earlier in life. He understood his opponents intimately. He also understood something equally important. Malta could not defeat the Ottoman Empire in open battle. Its only hope lay behind stone walls. Every cannon repositioned, every bastion strengthened, every sack of grain counted, every barrel of water inspected. History was preparing another siege, one greater than any before. Imagine Malta in the spring of 1565. Wildflowers briefly cover rocky hills before summer heat arrives. The sea remains calm. Fishermen continue their routines. Children play inside narrow streets. Church bells echo across the Grand Harbor. Life appears peaceful, yet beneath the surface, everyone senses what is coming. Blacksmiths work longer hours. Women preserve extra food. Ships unload powder instead of ordinary cargo. The hospitals quietly expand their supplies. No one says it aloud. Everyone knows. On May 18th, 1565, the horizon filled with sails. Hundreds, then hundreds more. The Ottoman invasion fleet had arrived. Perhaps 30,000 men. Perhaps 40,000. Modern estimates vary. Contemporary witnesses usually preferred much larger numbers. Whatever the exact figure, it represented one of the greatest amphibious invasions of the 16th century. The defenders numbered perhaps 8,000 altogether. Hospitaller knights, Spanish soldiers, Italian troops, Maltese militia, ordinary civilians. The imbalance felt familiar. The Hospitallers had lived this story before. Jerusalem, Acre, Rhodes, now Malta. History, it seemed, enjoyed giving them impossible odds. Grand Master de Valette walked the walls daily. Not dramatically, Not theatrically, quietly. He spoke with engineers, encouraged artillery crews, visited hospitals, shared meals with ordinary soldiers. He was over 70 years old, yet he refused comfortable safety. His presence alone strengthened morale. Leadership sometimes consists simply of remaining visible, especially when everyone else is frightened. The first Ottoman objective became Fort St. Elmo, a relatively small fortress guarding the entrance to the Grand Harbor. Many believed it could not hold long, perhaps a week, two at most. Instead, its defenders transformed themselves into legend. For nearly a month, they resisted relentless bombardment. Every day, cannons reduced more of the walls to rubble. Every night, survivors rebuilt whatever they could. The hospital boats crossed the harbor after darkness, carrying wounded men back toward the main defenses. Some never returned. Others insisted upon returning immediately, not because they expected survival, because someone still held the walls. The struggle for St. Elmo became one of the bloodiest episodes in the Order's history. By the time the fort finally fell, almost every defender had been killed, yet they had delayed the Ottoman advance by weeks. Thousands of Ottoman soldiers had fallen in the assault. Time itself had become the defenders' greatest weapon. Each sunrise purchased another day for the rest of Malta to prepare. Sometimes heroism is measured not in victory, but in hours. From across the harbor, the remaining Hospitallers watched the final battle through smoke and cannon fire. They knew many of the men fighting there personally. Brothers, friends, mentors, students. They could do little except continue preparing for the next assault. War often demands unbearable patience. Night settles gently over Malta. The stars reflect across quiet water that only hours before had been churned by cannon fire. Within the hospitals, physicians continue working beside flickering lamps. Outside, engineers repaired damaged walls under cover of darkness. Grand Master de Valette kneels briefly in prayer before returning to the ramparts. He knows this siege has only begun. The greatest attacks are still ahead. The fate of Malta, perhaps even the balance of power in the Mediterranean, will soon depend upon a handful of exhausted defenders who refuse to abandon their posts. And before this story finally reaches its peaceful conclusion, the Knights Hospitaller will fight the battle that secures their place among the greatest defenders in history. The Great Siege of Malta, the last stand of the White Cross. Night is the only time a besieged city truly breathes. The cannons finally grow quiet. The smoke slowly drifts out across the dark Mediterranean. Lanterns flicker along battered walls where exhausted men sit with their backs against warm limestone, too tired to speak. Somewhere in the distance, a mason carefully places another block into a shattered bastion. A priest whispers prayers over a wounded soldier who has already fallen asleep before the blessing is complete. The sea, meanwhile, continues its eternal rhythm. Wave after wave. Soft. Patient. Completely indifferent to the struggle unfolding upon its shore. Perhaps that is why people have always found comfort in the ocean. It reminds us that even the loudest wars eventually become silence. By June of 1565, Fort St. Elmo had fallen. The tiny fortress had delayed the Ottoman army for nearly a month. Nearly every defender had died, but they had purchased something priceless: time. And in warfare, time often becomes more valuable than gold. The Ottoman commanders had expected a quick victory. Instead, they inherited thousands of casualties and a stubborn enemy that seemed almost impossible to discourage. Grand Master Jean de Valette understood exactly what had happened. He had sacrificed one fortress to save an island. It was a terrible decision, probably the correct one. History sometimes demands those. Now the struggle shifted toward the twin strongholds of Birgu and Sanglia. Unlike St. Elmo, these towns formed the true heart of Hospitaller Malta. Their walls had been strengthened repeatedly over previous decades. Bastions projected outward like enormous stone fists. Cannons overlooked every possible approach. Harbor chains blocked enemy ships. Underground magazines stored precious gunpowder. Hospitals waited behind the front lines. Everything had been prepared. Now came the difficult part: actually surviving. The Ottoman camp covered much of the surrounding countryside. Thousands of tents stretched across dusty hills. Cooking fires filled the evening air with smoke. Horses grazed wherever grass remained. Blacksmiths repaired damaged weapons. Engineers measured distances for fresh batteries of artillery. It resembled a temporary city, one dedicated entirely to reducing another city into ruins. Each sunrise began similarly. The first cannon fired, then another. Soon hundreds echoed across the harbor. Stone shattered. Earth erupted. Wood splintered. Church bells disappeared beneath constant thunder. The bombardment lasted hour after hour until the walls themselves seemed alive, trembling beneath relentless impacts. People gradually stopped flinching. One cannot remain startled forever. Eventually, even catastrophe becomes routine, a strangely human adaptation. Inside Burgu, daily life continued in astonishing fashion. Bread was still baked. Water still distributed. Children still helped wherever they could. Some carried messages. Others fetched bandages. Women prepared meals for soldiers before spending afternoons transporting stones to damaged walls. Entire families participated in the defense. There were no spectators, only participants. The hospital overflowed. Again and again, every available room became a ward. Tables served as operating benches. Churches housed additional patients. Doctors and barber surgeons worked until exhaustion blurred together with determination. They amputated shattered limbs, removed arrowheads, stitched terrible wounds, applied poultices made from herbs gathered months before the siege. Sometimes they succeeded. Sometimes infection claimed victories no Ottoman sword had achieved. Still they continued, because healing had never depended upon certainty, only effort. Grandmaster de Valette visited the hospital almost every evening, not for ceremony, for conversation. He spoke quietly with wounded knights, with Maltese civilians, with frightened children. He thanked physicians, encouraged nurses. His presence reminded everyone that suffering had not gone unnoticed. Leadership often means witnessing pain without turning away. The Ottomans soon recognized that artillery alone would not secure victory. They prepared a massive assault. Thousands of janissaries assembled before dawn. Elite soldiers, disciplined, professionally trained from youth. Their reputation alone intimidated opponents across Europe. Today they marched toward Burgu. The defenders waited silently behind broken walls. Crossbows ready, arquebuses loaded, cannons packed with scrap iron. Priests offered final blessings. Some men crossed themselves. Others simply gripped their weapons a little tighter. When the attack came, it seemed almost unstoppable. Wave after wave surged forward carrying ladders, shields, and scaling hooks. Ottoman drums echoed across the harbor. Battle cries answered from the walls. Smoke swallowed everything. Visibility shrank to only a few yards. Men fought not for kingdoms anymore, but for whichever stretch of wall stood directly before them. The fighting became almost unimaginably close. Swords, axes, pikes, daggers, broken stones, boiling water. Even furniture found unexpected military applications. One chronicler described defenders hurling everything they could lift. History tends to remember elegant weapons. Sieges often reward creativity instead. Several Ottoman banners reached the battlements. Briefly, Hospitaller counterattacks threw them back. Again and again, the walls changed hands repeatedly within the same afternoon. Victory lasted minutes, sometimes seconds. Every step forward required another sacrifice. Every step backward invited disaster. Then something remarkable happened. Grandmaster de Valette himself entered the fighting. He was 70 years old. Most men of that age in the 16th century hoped for peaceful retirement. Instead, he stood upon collapsing walls wearing armor beneath the summer sun, sword in hand, encouraging defenders by example rather than command. Several witnesses later claimed simply seeing him restored exhausted soldiers' courage. Whether embellished or entirely accurate, the story reflects an important truth. People often fight hardest when they believe their leaders share the danger. The siege stretched into July, then August. The Mediterranean summer became merciless. Heat shimmered above stone walls. Water grew increasingly precious. The smell? History rarely discusses the smell. Thousands of men living within crowded fortifications. Gunpowder, smoke, sweat, animals, the wounded, the dead, disease. It must have been overwhelming. Yet people adapted. Humans possess astonishing resilience when necessity demands it. Outside the walls, the Ottoman commanders faced growing frustration. Their army remained powerful. Their artillery remained formidable. Yet every assault cost lives. Every delay consumed supplies. The defenders refused to collapse. The island refused to surrender. Some victories become more expensive than expected. Sometimes, too expensive. In late August came perhaps the greatest attack of the entire siege. The Ottomans launched simultaneous assaults against multiple positions. Cannons roared continuously. Infantry surged through breaches. Ships attempted attacks from the harbor. For several terrifying hours, it appeared the defenses might finally fail. Hospitaller reserves rushed wherever fighting became most desperate. Citizens joined soldiers. Priests carried ammunition. Physicians abandoned hospitals briefly to help reinforce barricades. Every available person became part of the defense. At one critical moment, a small group of Spanish soldiers launched an unexpected counterattack. Their charge struck the exhausted Ottoman troops at precisely the right instant. Confusion spread. Momentum shifted. The attackers withdrew. Another breach had been sealed. Not with fresh stone. With courage. History contains countless moments balanced upon decisions lasting only seconds. This was one of them. As September approached, whispers began spreading through both camps. Relief might be coming. Spanish reinforcements had been promised. Would they arrive? No one knew. Rumors multiplied daily. Every distant sail inspired hope. Or disappointment. Waiting became its own form of torture. Finally, on September 7th, 1565, sails appeared upon the western horizon. Not Ottoman. Spanish. Approximately 8,000 fresh troops landed. Compared with the invading army, the relief force remained relatively small. Compared with the exhausted defenders, it seemed enormous. The psychological effect proved decisive. The Ottomans, already weakened by months of losses, recognized that time had finally turned against them. Within days, they began withdrawing. The Great Siege of Malta was over. Silence returned gradually. The cannons stopped. Smoke cleared. The sea resumed its gentle rhythm. Citizens emerged cautiously from shelters. Church bells rang across the harbor. Many wept openly. Not from triumph alone. From relief. After 4 months of unimaginable strain, survival itself felt miraculous. The cost had been staggering. Thousands of Ottoman soldiers lay dead. Thousands of defenders had fallen. Entire neighborhoods lay in ruins. Fort St. Elmo had been reduced almost to dust. Hospitals overflowed long after the fighting ended. Families mourned husbands, wives, children, brothers. Victory never erased grief. It merely allowed grieving to continue in peace. News spread across Europe with astonishing speed. Printers produced pamphlets. Churches celebrated. Kings congratulated the order. Artists painted heroic scenes. Jean de Valette became one of the most famous men in Christendom. Whether Malta truly saved Europe remains debated by historians. History is usually more complicated than simple turning points. Yet one fact remains certain. The siege demonstrated that the Ottoman Empire could be resisted. That mattered enormously. Sometimes hope itself becomes a strategic victory. Soon construction began upon an entirely new city. A stronger city. A city designed specifically to prevent another siege like the last. It would bear the Grand Master's name. Valletta. Today its streets still overlook the same harbor where those battles unfolded centuries ago. Its walls still rise from golden limestone cliffs. Its churches still catch the morning sun. The city itself became a monument, not to conquest, to endurance. As evening settles once more over Malta, gentle breezes carry the scent of salt across quiet bastions rebuilt after unimaginable destruction. The brothers gather once again inside their chapel. Their prayers sound exactly as they did in Jerusalem, exactly as they did on Rhodes. Places have changed. Empires have risen and fallen. Generations have disappeared. Yet the white cross still hangs above the altar, still illuminated by candlelight, still reminding every brother that service sometimes survives where kingdoms do not. The Hospitallers have reached the height of their fame, but every summit is followed by another journey. The centuries ahead will bring changing weapons, changing politics, revolutions, Napoleon himself, in a world that no longer has room for medieval military orders. The final chapter has not yet been written. Only the last battle of their greatest age has ended. From Malta to the modern world, the last journey of the Knights Hospitaller. The strangest thing about victory is how quietly life returns afterward. After the cheering fades, after the banners are folded away, after the cannons grow cold, someone still has to bake bread. Someone still has to sweep the streets. Someone still has to care for the sick. History loves dramatic endings. Real life almost never provides them. Instead, it continues. Slowly, patiently, almost as though nothing extraordinary had happened. If you had walked through Valletta a few years after the Great Siege of Malta, you would have found merchants once again haggling over the price of olives, sailors laughing in waterfront taverns, children racing through narrow limestone streets, and Hospitaller brothers quietly making their rounds through the hospital. The island had survived. Now it had to live. Grand Master Jean de Valette did not live long enough to enjoy the city that bore his name. He died in 1568, only 3 years after the Great Siege. By then, construction had already begun on what many called a city built by gentlemen for gentlemen. Valletta rose rapidly from the rocky peninsula overlooking the Grand Harbor. Unlike many medieval cities that grew gradually over centuries, Valletta was carefully planned. Wide streets, straight avenues, massive bastions, sophisticated drainage, underground cisterns, elegant churches, grand albergues or residences for each long of the order. Engineers from Italy applied the newest ideas in military architecture. Everything reflected confidence. Everything reflected survival. The city itself seemed to declare, "We endured." At the heart of Valletta stood the hospital. Not merely a hospital, perhaps the finest hospital in Europe. The Sacra Infermeria became famous across the continent. Travelers wrote about it with genuine admiration. The great ward stretched for hundreds of feet beneath vaulted ceilings. Sunlight entered through tall windows overlooking the harbor. Patients rested in individual beds instead of sharing crowded mattresses. Clean linen was changed regularly. Meals were carefully prepared according to each patient's condition. Fresh air circulated through the building. Cleanliness became almost an obsession. Remarkably, visitors often commented that the floors were washed several times each day. This may not sound revolutionary today. In the 16th century, it absolutely was. The Hospitallers believed that caring for the sick honored Christ himself. Their original mission had survived every crusade, every siege, every exile. While Europe often remembered them for swords and armor, many of their patients remembered them for warm blankets, for bowls of soup, for gentle voices speaking quietly in the middle of the night. Sometimes history celebrates battles while forgetting kindness. The Hospitallers tried very hard not to. The order also became one of the Mediterranean's most respected naval powers. Their fleet patrolled the sea constantly. Their sleek galleys sailed between Sicily, Malta, Greece, and the coast of North Africa. They escorted merchant convoys, hunted pirates, protected pilgrims. Sometimes they captured Ottoman vessels during wartime. Sometimes Ottoman fleets captured theirs. The Mediterranean remained a dangerous sea. Peace existed. It simply tended to arrive in short installments. Daily life for a Hospitaller knight remained surprisingly disciplined. He rose before dawn, attended prayers, performed assigned duties, maintained weapons, trained regularly, visited the hospital if assigned there, participated in administration if holding office, shared simple meals with fellow brothers. Luxury remained officially discouraged. Though, like many long-lived institutions, the order occasionally struggled to practice all of its ideals perfectly. As generations passed, some knights became wealthier. Some preferred elegant clothing. Others enjoyed lavish banquets. Critics noticed. Critics always notice. By the 17th century, Europe itself was changing. Gunpowder had transformed warfare. Cannons dominated battlefields. Fortifications evolved continuously. Armored knights charging across open fields became increasingly rare. Professional standing armies replaced many medieval military traditions. Kings relied less upon religious orders, more upon national armies. The world that had created the Hospitallers slowly disappeared. The Hospitallers themselves remained, but they increasingly belonged to another age. The Enlightenment arrived. Scientists questioned ancient assumptions. Philosophers debated reason and liberty. Commerce expanded. Empires crossed oceans. The center of European attention gradually shifted away from the Eastern Mediterranean. America entered world history. The Atlantic became more important than the Levant. Trade routes changed. Politics changed. Ideas changed. The White Cross still flew over Malta, but the world around it no longer resembled the world of the Crusades. Then came the French Revolution. Almost overnight, Europe transformed. Kings lost thrones. Church lands were seized. Ancient institutions found themselves under suspicion. Religious military orders appeared increasingly old-fashioned to revolutionary governments. The Hospitallers depended heavily upon estates across Europe. Many of those estates disappeared. Income declined dramatically. Financial difficulties multiplied. An organization built over 7 centuries suddenly faced problems no sword could solve. Then history introduced one more extraordinary figure, Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1798, while sailing toward Egypt, Napoleon stopped at Malta. Officially, he requested permission for his fleet to enter the harbor. The Grand Master hesitated. The order's rules limited the admission of large hostile fleets. Napoleon had little patience for medieval regulations. His army landed. Resistance proved brief. The Hospitallers faced an impossible situation. Many of the French knights within the order refused to fight their own countrymen. Internal divisions weakened any organized defense. After ruling Malta for 268 years, the Hospitallers surrendered the island. Remarkably quietly. No great siege. No legendary last stand. History often ends eras not with explosions, but with paperwork. Napoleon departed only days later, continuing toward Egypt. The Hospitallers departed too. For the third time in their history, they became homeless. Jerusalem, Rhodes, now Malta. Few organizations have survived losing 3 homes across 7 centuries. Fewer still remained recognizable afterward. The 19th century became a period of uncertainty. Different branches of the order emerged across Europe. Some emphasized noble traditions. Others emphasized charitable work. Political recognition varied between nations. Governments rose and fell. Orders shifted. Yet one idea endured: helping the sick, helping the poor, helping those displaced by war. Curiously, the oldest part of their mission proved the most timeless. Gradually, the military identity faded. The charitable identity grew stronger. Hospitals expanded. Ambulance services developed. Relief organizations formed. Medical missions traveled wherever disasters occurred. Wars changed. The Hospitallers changed with them. The swords slowly disappeared. The hospital remained. Brother Gerard, once suspects, would have approved. Today, the organization continues as the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. The name sounds wonderfully medieval. Its work is remarkably modern. Across more than 100 countries, volunteers and medical professionals provide disaster relief, emergency health care, refugee assistance, care for the elderly, support for people experiencing homelessness, and humanitarian aid. Their ambulances respond to emergencies. Their hospitals treat patients. Their volunteers comfort those facing loneliness or illness. They no longer defend Jerusalem's walls. Instead, they defend human dignity. The battlefield has changed. The mission, in many ways, has not. If Brother Gerard could somehow walk through one of the Order's modern hospitals, he would surely be astonished. Electric lights instead of candles. Antibiotics instead of herbal poultices. MRI scanners instead of careful guesswork. Doctors washing hands with scientific understanding rather than hopeful tradition. Patients surviving illnesses that once guaranteed death. Yet amid all those astonishing differences, he might also recognize something familiar. A volunteer adjusting someone's blanket. A nurse speaking softly to an anxious patient. A meal served with kindness. Compassion requires remarkably little translation across centuries. Walk today through Valletta at sunset. The golden limestone glows warmly beneath the fading Mediterranean light. The massive bastions still stand exactly where exhausted knights defended them in 1565. Cannons remain on display, now silent. Tourists wander streets once filled with soldiers. Cats sleep peacefully where engineers once dragged enormous artillery pieces. The Grand Harbor welcomes cruise ships rather than war galleys. History has softened. Without erasing itself, travel farther east to Rhodes. The palace of the Grand Master still rises above winding medieval streets. The hospitals remain. The towers remain. Stone remembers, even when people forget. And if you somehow found yourself standing outside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem late at night, long after the pilgrims have gone, long after the market stalls have closed, you might imagine Brother Gerard quietly carrying bread through dark streets toward a small hospital beside the church. He could never have imagined what would follow. Not the Crusades, not Rhodes, not Malta, not global humanitarian missions. He simply saw exhausted strangers and decided to help. Everything else grew from that single decision. So perhaps the true story of the Knights Hospitaller is not really about castles, or crusades, or sieges, or kings. Those are magnificent chapters, but not the beginning, and not the heart. The heart of the story begins with a bed prepared for a tired traveler, a bowl of warm soup, a bandaged wound, a hand offered to someone who had no one else. History often remembers those who conquered. It sometimes forgets those who cared. The Hospitallers managed, somehow, to become both warriors and healers. Yet only one of those roles survived into the modern world. And perhaps, that tells us which one mattered most. Now the Mediterranean grows quiet once more. The moon rises over waters that have reflected Phoenician ships, Roman triremes, Arab dhows, Crusader cogs, Ottoman galleys, steamships, and modern ferries. Empires have come and gone like the tides. Jerusalem changed hands. Rhodes changed hands. Malta changed hands. Even the mightiest kingdoms eventually became chapters in history books. But kindness proved more durable than stone, more enduring than walls, more lasting than crowns. As the night deepens and the sea whispers softly against ancient harbors, imagine the white eight-pointed cross glowing faintly beneath the stars. Not as a symbol of conquest, not as a reminder of war, but as a quiet promise first made nearly 1,000 years ago, that no weary traveler should be left alone, that no wounded stranger should be abandoned, that even in the darkest centuries, compassion could survive. And perhaps, after all this time, that is the greatest legacy the Knights Hospitaller ever left behind. The harbor is calm now. The bells have fallen silent. The candles burn low, and somewhere beyond the sound of the waves, history gently closes its eyes. End of documentary.